Thank you. Thanks, kiddo. Yeah, stick it in there so that we can. That's it.
Is that all right?
Okay. Now, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
That's the most important. Thank you, Mariana, and thank you, you four. I always love coming to Sydney because there's two groups that I'm particularly close to, and one of them is you four and the other one's at Campbelltown, and Lorraine Cilia and her PRSA UFO group in Campbelltown. So I always feel like I'm coming home when I come to Sydney. And it's a great pleasure today because I would like to introduce you to a little bit more of the rabbit hole which Mariana and I actually thoroughly enjoy, because this is where I think we will find more of our answers. And today I'm going to cover where we are now with ufology and where we're going, and what we're finding with new research that has literally only come to light in the last 6 months. I'm also going to talk a little bit about what I've been discovering with families with children and what these children have been talking about. That in itself is quite astounding. And it has been for me as I've talked to some of these children and what they've told me. So I'm going to really cover a great deal today. I'll try not to talk too fast because I'm inclined to do that because I want to cram as much in as possible in the time I have. But luckily I have a reasonable amount of time today. So I will be able to just slow up a little bit and give you some time to actually perhaps take on board what makes sense to you. And I'm talking about human transformation because if we're wanting to know what this is all about, certainly the major thing that's coming to light is we are changing as a species, and many of you here perhaps already understand that. One of the reasons this is so profound, and has been ever since I met Mike Oram, who's now in his 60s, a lovely gentleman in the UK that lives in the Lake District, and he's had interactions with the light beings, but he was only 4 years old when he said this: "There will be a change in human consciousness. It will affect all human consciousness. The energy is headed this way, and the essence of this energy is light. This energy will repair our DNA. It will make us complete and who we really are." He said this to his mother at 4 years old in the 50s. And he said that it will be something that happens which will not be relevant to her because she won't be here, but will be relevant to him. So let's start with crossing the bridge between the old paradigm and the new. And many of you here will be doing that. You've got a foot in each camp, because that's what we're needing to do, because ultimately I believe what we're talking about is human consciousness. And I would really love it if this works for me. Angels? We're not getting any sound, are we? Can we hear it? Could do with being a bit louder, perhaps. Still not hearing it. Is there a way of turning this up? Oh, okay. It could be a bit louder. Here we go. Seeing here is a combination of my work with ACERN over many, many years, and also the new organization that I have become part of. I'm a co-founder of this organization, and I want to tell you a little bit more about that and what we've discovered. One of the gentlemen that I've highly regarded for many, many years, and it was one of the books I read before my very first client came to see me, Ellis Taylor. And many of you may know of Ellis Taylor now. He's an author of 4 books and has his own website. But he was my very first client. And he came to me in my private practice and said, "Mary, I've heard you're open-minded. For this, there are no support groups. For this, they just think you're crazy." I just read this book by Dr. John Mack, Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens. And what Dr. Mack, who had impeccable credentials as a professor of psychiatry at Harvard University, said this: "Extraterrestrial contact reality is literally and physically happening. It's literally and physically happening to a degree, and also a kind of psychological spiritual experience occurring and originating, perhaps in another dimension. The phenomena stretches us, or it asks us to be open to realities that are not simply the literal physical world, but to extend the possibility that there are other unseen realities from which our consciousness, our, if you will, learning processes over the past several hundred years have closed us off. And I think we understand that really well. And I'm going to go into where this is taking us now. The organisation of FREE has only really been going the last couple of years. I'm one of the co-founders with Ray Hernandez, and who also came into this organisation was Dr. Edgar Mitchell. As you know, he was the sixth man to walk on the moon, had a transformative experience when he was in space, and from that created his own Consciousness Institute. And also Dr. Rudy Shield, who's an astrophysicist. And what we decided, even though it's called Extra-terrestrial Encounters, that incorporates everything that is related to this, whether you consider your experiences happen through a near-death experience, out-of-body experience, you see yourself as a hybrid or dual consciousness, or a shamanic experience. All of these are inclusive in how we are exploring extraterrestrial encounters. The FREE Foundation believes that the evidence for the reality of extraterrestrial encounters is supported scientifically through the quantum hologram theory of physics and linked to non-ordinary states of consciousness. And you will see from the focus we have that we're taking it to a whole new level in ufology. Dr. Rudy Shield is one of our directors, and what is interesting with Dr. Shield, he's for many years spoken about this reality. And this is what he's saying. Today we live in an exciting world where the advances in space exploration and astrophysics are matched by the wonder of UFO sightings and abductions and deeper human inner space experiences. But because of the ethereal nature of the data, there are developments that are not studied by our prestigious university community, largely because of their nature. We all know this. We perceive a need to extend this approach to a larger statistical base with rigorous statistical techniques to expand the discussion and provide a database available to the academic community. And this is what FREE is about. What we're doing now is we're stepping back into the 3D world and saying, hold on a minute, we are now going to expose you to what this is. And what we have discovered in our surveys is completely new and astonishing. Because most of you will know in popular media, and what's been put there primarily is being most often a very negative, sensationalistic view of what the abduction contact experience has been. And this is going to shock a lot of ufologists, I can tell you, that have always believed that this is most of the time greys or reptilians, very few humans, and it has been, on the most part, a very negative experience. It blew us away. The very first survey of 2,000 individuals, it blew us away. Our second survey, which went deeper, blew us away even more. We're now doing the third and fourth. And we're doing it playing the game. We're using academic professors. One of them is Dr. John Klimo, who's been a professor of psychology and parapsychology for 40 years, and a neuroscientist, Dr. Bob Davis. So we've got the gentlemen with the credentials that are putting this together, as well as our scientists. So look what we're finding. It is absolutely astounding. 58% saw a UFO, 33% experienced, only 33% experienced what they thought was an abduction. 66% experienced some form of telepathic communication. 41% received information on new technologies. 93% a decrease in materialistic values, really fascinating. 75% the contact was positive and life-changing. This is not the stats that you get out there in the mainstream. 50% reported amazing healing experiences. And if I have time, I'll tell you more about that. 44% consented to their encounters. Isn't it interesting? 47.55 enhanced ability to learn. And what I mean by that, they've been upgraded. They have been given abilities to take in more information in intelligence than they ever had before. 55% experienced missing time episodes, 95% experienced some type of paranormal experience. The humanoid being is the most commonly seen by experience and is not the tall or short greys or any of the other species that you perhaps have been shown to be the case. And we're getting up to the second survey as well. 35 experienced a near-death experience. 80% experienced out-of-body experiences. 74% saw spirits or ghosts. 70.35% experienced expanded consciousness with extraterrestrials. 65.71% had ET contact but no abduction. 84% a sense of mission. 85% believed that there was a connection between ETs and the spirit world pre-birth and post-death. So we're going into a whole new area of multidimensional reality. 15.56% believe they've experienced soul swapping. And I'm going to explain a little bit of that to you as well. We really are going down the rabbit hole now. 82% believe there's a connection between ETs and reincarnation. 85% have undergone major, positive, transformative, spiritual and less materialistic and concern for the environment. So up to now, almost for the last 50, 60, 70 years, and it's understandable why, most of ufology has focused on the nuts and bolts because we've needed to prove and make it real for people that do not believe this is a reality. So we've focused on all of this. Photographs, video of spacecraft, for example, sightings by credible witnesses such as police and pilots makes it more real. Implanted objects. Dr. Roger Leir and his implants and his book where he wrote about taking out these implants, The Aliens and the Scalpel, a very fascinating book if you want tangible reality. Marks and scars that fluoresce under black ultraviolet night were telling you had an experience, for example. Whistleblower testimony, military and political disclosure. Missing time episodes, and that's been very valuable because if you can take somebody into the missing time episode, for example, they will find more of what has happened. EMF, magnetic changes in soil, multiple witness testimony, conscious recall always seem to be the most important. If it's conscious recall, then you can trust it. I'm going to say something about that too. But the most interesting, and the thing for me that I focused on, there are two important things that I think are telling us so much more about this reality. And some of this is because my background was nursing midwifery, and I have a side of me that wants to see the tangibility, and it's in the DNA. And this is something I focused on with not only myself, but some scientists to say, what is it about the DNA that can tell us about this reality? Intelligent design, extraterrestrial manipulation, physical and non-physical, the holographic nature of DNA that links to our multidimensional cells. And I'm going to take what really Dr. John Mack has said. We seem to have had no place or lost the place for the phenomena that can begin in the unseen realm and cross over and manifest and show up in our literal physical world, whereby we might know the spirit world, which has made the alien phenomena so hard to believe. In other words, we have to create a new psychological model. And this is where we hope free will be one of the mainstays of that new psychological model. These are all the things that they've not wanted to touch in ufology. Why? Because it means we've got to start looking at a new way of assessing what is real, what isn't real. What about our multidimensional world? And yet everyone who's had experiences has had multidimensional experiences. So what are we looking at? Out-of-body experiences, astral travel, near-death experiences, time distortions, missing and distorted time, very, very important. Stretch time, healing during encounters and healing abilities, altered and enhanced senses, heightened intelligence, information, knowledge, downloads such as advanced physics, heightened multidimensional senses such as telepathy, clairvoyance, past life recall both on Earth and other planets, telekinesis, moving objects with the mind, transformative changes in perspective, holistic lifestyles and attitude, expressions of contact, the scripts, the artwork, the languages that are so obvious to me as evidence something important has occurred. You don't have these kinds of things manifest unless something very real has happened. Shamanic types of experiences, and again, the multidimensional nature of DNA. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how I believe the DNA is crucial in understanding our multidimensional experiences. And before I take you to what individuals have told me, and you're going to hear an account by Dr. Lena Ohlson about her own experiences. She's a molecular biologist, a young lady from the UK, who's going to talk about her seeking answers and her telekinetic abilities, for example, and what some of the children are saying. So, some of you already have been there, done that with this one. The evidence that we have been visited by many different species and intelligences that were gods with the little g. Many, many indigenous tribes have spoken about gods coming down and accessing human DNA and altering it or adding their own DNA. The Anunnaki are one that Zechariah Sitchin, the biblical scholar, talked about in his books, and saying the Anunnaki were one. I have testimonies from some of the children that explain how these gods have manipulated human DNA and actually on various star systems. And I'm talking about young children talking about this, 7-year-old children, for example. So what have we got here as something that really just sets the scene, if you like? Pharaohs of ancient Egypt were some of them hybrids. Remember, some of the pharaohs said that they were sons of gods. Some of you may know this is what they said. What they've already discovered with Akhenaten, apart from the fact that he had this very unusual shaped skull, which we're seeing in Peru, Mexico, for example, and places like that. And initially it was thought that that was a binding done by indigenous tribes as a way of perhaps creating beauty, until they discovered that the cranial capacity was almost normal, the human cranial capacity, and also that some of the fetuses they found had the same shaped skull. So this is what they discovered. It suggests he had a higher cranial capacity because of the need to house a larger cortex. The gene called CXPAC/5, responsible for cortex growth, suggests an anomaly which is visible in the image below. So if you want to look this up for yourselves and explore it more, I'm only touching on it because I'm taking, if you like, a very broad overview for you now. But this was also interesting about Akhenaten, is this evidence of genes spliced with extraterrestrial genes? 2 microscopic samples left of Akhenaten and write a mummy of the same age. Akhenaten's bone is denser and fundamentally different to the right normal bone in another similar mummy. So when we start looking into this, from all different levels of our history, we start to see links. We start to see the way that we can understand a little bit more of what's going on. I mentioned Dr. Crick many times because he was one that actually always said in his book Life Itself that we actually came from spacecraft, that ultimately we were being visited and that we were being altered. What he said here, and there's 2 important points in this that I want to draw your attention to. First of all, the DNA molecule is the most efficient information storage system in the entire universe. The immensity of complex, coded, and precisely sequenced information is staggering. The DNA evidence speaks of intelligent, information-bearing design. They have now discovered one of the best ways to store information, that a gram of DNA will actually contain terabytes of information. Now, this is linking to what have we got in our DNA. And look at what he's saying here. They programmed the molecules so that when we reached a certain level of intelligence, we would be able to access their information, and they could therefore teach us about ourselves and how to progress. For life to form by chance is mathematically virtually impossible. Now, this is the co-founder of the DNA molecule. So the credentials are there. Make up your own mind what you want to make of that. But this is something else that I discovered recently, and it continues with this wonderful information around what we still don't know about DNA. 50 years of DNA research turned upside down, scientists discover second programming language within the human genetic code. They've only just discovered it. And what have we got here? There is a hidden code or a second code which contains information which alters how the scientists read instructions in the DNA and interpret mutations. The scientists have discovered genomes use the genetic code to write 2 separate languages. One is written on top of the other. these findings highlight that DNA is an incredibly powerful storage device. We still don't know everything about what our DNA is about. But one thing is certain, that we have had some form of manipulation or alteration in our DNA. We are a designed species, says a whistleblower geneticist in the book, The Intervention Theory. And he wrote to Lloyd Pye. Some of you may have known of Lloyd Pye before he passed. He spent the remainder of his life studying the anomalies in this particular star child skull here. And what he found were amazing anomalies, including the mitochondrial DNA was in fact not human. And this is what was in the book that I asked him if I could quote. Of course, by certain methods of DNA dating, we can tell numerous genes have been recently added to the human genome. We already have 223 that are a sideways insertion of genetic material that are all to do with higher psychological functioning. Higher psychological functioning. And no other species on this planet has those genes. And I was told this by a scientist who worked with Dr. Crick. If colleagues in my field were to say such things openly, we would be ostracized and forced to live in a tent. Any work along these lines would be rejected without any form of appeal. So what can we do? And this is the problem. Almost in every area of human knowledge, we have truth and we have disinformation. The reason I've brought Dr. Bruce Lipton in here is it's not just about the DNA. However, it's about human experience that creates our reality. And Dr. Bruce Lipton does it beautifully in The Biology of Belief. I met him actually in Montreal, most amazing gentleman dealing with epigenetics. And he said that also the cell itself is intelligent and we are not DNA determined. In the sense of that, what he's basically saying is everything that we learn from our parents to our siblings to our teachers also shapes what reality we finally have. So if you're told, for example, your experiences aren't real, if you get told enough, you shut down. So many of us then get to the point where that can't possibly be real because I've been told it's not real, no matter what I'm experiencing. So that's been part of the problem, is what we're taught, what our beliefs are, and why many of us shut down from that reality. But if we embrace consciousness and that everything has a sentience, which is what the experiencers are telling me when they have these experiences, that are connecting through the matrix to everything, that everything is sentient and intelligent. This is a lovely little account that will give you an idea of what I mean. This gentleman is in the 1930s, came across this information. Luther Burbank, he was a botanist, horticulturalist and pioneer in agricultural science. And he said, the secret of improved plant breeding is love. He changed the genetic structure of hundreds of plants, including fruit and vegetables. He talked to his plants, as recorded in Autobiography of a Yogi, and he said that in experiments to make spineless cacti, he told the plants, you don't need your protective thorns, I will protect you. Gradually, the useful plant emerged was a thornless variety. Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting? And here we go. Multidimensional beings. Let's look at this. We now find from research from scientists in Russia that our DNA has some incredible, absolutely incredible properties. They're saying that DNA produces magnetized wormholes to transmit information from outside space and time to our consciousness, a biological internet, a holographic computer. So how do we access it then? Through our DNA. Living chromosomes function like a holographic computer using endogenous DNA laser radiation, are able to modulate certain frequency patterns onto laser ray and influence the DNA frequency and thus the genetic information itself. So we are accessing information through our DNA. DNA can cause disturbing patterns in the vacuum, producing these wormholes, microscopic equivalents of the so-called Einstein-Rosen bridges in the vicinity of black holes that are tunnel connections between entirely different areas in the universe through which information can be transmitted outside of space-time. DNA attracts the information and passes it to our consciousness. Where does our multidimensional information come? Through our multidimensional biological link to consciousness itself through our DNA, the portals that we are. It explains phenomena such as precognitive insights, clairvoyance, intuition, telepathy, past lives, spontaneous and remote acts of healing, self-healing, remote influencing, weather patterns, the lot, once we are open to experiencing it. Dr. Ohlson I've been communicating with now for a number of years. She's a Swedish scientist, a molecular biologist, who is both an experiencer and a scientist. And this is her understanding of what we now know about human DNA. And she's saying this: human DNA has the ability to transform. The genes have all the characteristics of genes, but on another level they contain information of their origin with the tools to transform into a higher form. The information of the donors and their background is there, a hidden key, and like PC programmers hide their work. This key can be activated and these programmers know the person is ready to be contacted. The activated ones spread a signal to wake others up. I feel they are speeding this up, is her awareness with that. So what I'm going to encapsulate here is this. What I've tied in here up to the next part of this presentation is this. Scientific research suggests human DNA has a physical and multidimensional property. It contains anomalies and complexities. So what does it all mean? What is the evidence that Homo sapiens, our ancestors, were intelligently designed with added extraterrestrial genes to the human genome? Akhenaten is showing anomalous tissue samples. We have whistleblower information that DNA has altered genomes. We have research demonstrating that at the very least 2 levels of information streams are embedded in DNA. DNA operates multidimensionally through miniature wormholes to access quantum information and explains all our intuition, our knowledge such as telepathy and clairvoyance. We're programmable and that can be changed through human language. Epigenetics demonstrates DNA is conditioned and affected by human experiences, reality constructs, beliefs and attitudes to experiences. All of that will decide your perspective on how you see reality in this world. Applicable to DNA and other species, not only human, but plants. We've already discovered that with Burbank. It has the ability to transform itself and affect others via its frequency. What impact is there on DNA via our extraterrestrial programmers and our encounters with them? That's where we're going. So let's have a look at it. UFO encounters are modern-day shamanic wake-up call. And I say that because I was part of a survey, a thesis by Simon Harvey Wilson in 2000 at Edith Cowan University, and I was asked to participate in that. And what Simon discovered with those from ACERN that were willing to be interviewed and his understanding of shamanism were the parallels. And the parallels were that to be a shaman, you have to transcend fear, to go and be part or experience or understand your multidimensional reality. Healing abilities, present and past lives with ETs, again, those that have shamanic experiences go into those realms. They see all these beings. Telepathic abilities are enhanced when you open and changes in perception. Look at the parallels to the ET encounter. So this is what the shamanic way of waking up may be for some of you, for example. So let's look at what Dr. Ohlson has experienced. And this is a big deal for her because in Scandinavia, particularly in Norway, Sweden and Denmark, they really struggle with ET encounters, far more so than other countries that I've come across, from England, the US, ourselves. In fact, we're a lot more open than many countries. So you don't talk about this if you want credentials. So for her, it was a very, very big deal. But this is ultimately what she told me she experienced. She had both physical and multidimensional experiences with numerous non-human intelligences and spirits. Now, we're getting away from just the little greys here and the tall greys or the reptilians or whatever. We're looking at many species here that people encounter, and this has not been known by mainstream. Experienced near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, past life recall, shamanic experiences, healing experiences both as a healer and healed by non-human intelligences, her intuitive understanding of the new human upgrades. And I'm going to go into this a little bit today to give you some idea of why we believe these are new programs. And I'm talking about the letter people she calls a quantum. And she's one of those letter people. And she'd explain why she thinks it's not dysfunctional genes. And those she calls Asperger's, ADHD, also dyslexia, and some forms of autism. I don't know if some of you actually know that Nikola Tesla was actually autistic as well, just to give you a little bit of an idea of where I'm going with that. Multidimensional abilities, scientific and intuitive understanding of loading and energizing water. All of this through her experiences. So the sign to come out of the space closet, as I call it, because that's the next step, I think, for all of those that are having experiences. This is what happened to her, and I don't know if you can see here, it's not all that clear. That's the cone-headed beings and also the mantid beings, both of those that she is seeing regularly. I consider the mantid to be my friends, and the first time I saw them without their disguise, the guidance and help I'm receiving, I know it's important for me to stay alive, evolving and developing my abilities because I feel great changes are coming in my lifetime. 6 months ago, I had a very strange healing experience, and why she's telling her story at this time. And it was actually last year she came out, and I wrote her story in the UFO Truth, a magazine in the UK. I asked for guidance to know if I was on track and if I should come out to give me a sign. I had severe dislocation of my atlas vertebrae, which was causing extreme discomfort. Spontaneously, the vertebrae rotates by itself into the correct position. I can now swallow without pain. This is what I call my sign, and so I'm coming out as promised. I continue with my health treatments, workshops, and retreats as long as I'm asked to help. So that was her sign to come out and start owning the fact that this is her experience. I'm giving you an overview here of some of the things that she told me about. And it is an amazing account, although it's not unique. One of the things here, she found she could hide in plain sight and go into the mind of another and convey, I was not there. I believe I controlled their awareness. She used to play hide and seek. And she found that when she was supposedly hiding, if she sent a message to their consciousness, you're not seeing me, they would not see her. And as a child, she found she could do this. Telekinesis, at a year old, she was moving large objects without help. She's had several past life recalls. And being a scientist, she wanted to prove to herself that she wasn't making this up or it was imaginative. She had a spontaneous past life recall where she was in a prison and she was going through this dreadful torture. And she found that in 1679, the oracle glass actually explained exactly what she had experienced in Paris. She can't, in fact, go to France and go to Paris without feeling really ill. She re-experienced part of the protocols mentioned in this book. In another past life, she experienced what appeared to be double vision when visiting Karnak, Egypt, and she recalled spontaneously was corroborated by archaeologists later. So for her, it was very, very important. She discovered healing abilities and learned how to focus energy. She told me she used this force, and she actually tried to turn on the television with this energy, and she set fire to the telly. So that wasn't so clever. Perceiving auras. During her doctoral studies, she saw coloured hazes around people. She's had shamanic experiences, perceiving old men in her room, sending her energy, orbs into her body. Out-of-body experiences, travelling through tunnels to other realms. So this is the whole other side of ufology that up to recently really has been very hard to talk about. And most ufologists were not comfortable because they didn't know how to research it, what to look for, how to decide what was real or not real, for example. Out-of-body experiences, near-death experience with an instant healing, puzzling the doctors. She was so concerned for her mental health, she had herself checked out in one of the top hospitals in Stockholm, where the doctor concluded I was one of the most stable and rational people he had met. So let's look at some of the beings. Unfortunately, the lights may be a bit too bright for you to see here. This is the soldier being that she calls Ramtar, who told her that he was there to keep her safe, for example. The other one here is the cone head, and I'll show you a better picture of the cone head and the mantis beings, the lion beings, and this one here is an orb with a craft in it. Because I'm going to bring in the orbs because they are part of this as well, as some of you may already know. So these are the kinds of beings. Now look at the variety. Mainstream doesn't even go there, does it? We've got Intelligences from the Andromeda Galaxy, the Gold Monk Buddha, fairy pixie beings she's connected with, water spirits, Native American guardians, shadow people, blue orb, water spirits, small brown flat skull beings appearing during healing sessions, an eagle man, an avatar human, a solid, fully conscious interaction on a train where he was fully physical, who helped her, cat being, leopard being during a healing, a mantid being, and various spirits who have passed on, and other entities. Look at the amount of different types of intelligences that she's experienced. And I know there'll be those in this room that say, so have I, because it is more than that. Now again, the 12-Ode guys, sadly this is her drawing. You can't see it very well, but she's got 12 guys with long hair and beards almost standing around her. And this is what she says: the 12-Ode guys come to guide me, teaching me different things in a shamanic way, with feelings, pictures, energy, orbs, abductions, but also by letting me experience different tests and almost failing dying, NDE, but in the last moment helping me to solve the task of the problem. They were the ones to help me understand. I have conversations when I'm awake and in meditation, because that is contact too. Many have downloads or telepathic communication. Again, you're not seeing the light being, which is here, which is almost it is very hard to see anyway. She said the radiant being with 6 arms, I feel, is an archangel. It performed a frequency adjustment, healing on me. I believe it to be Oriel. I also received a message about water. This radiant light being was standing at my feet when I was laying in bed, giving me a healing treatment. And the only thing she was afraid of was this particular being, which she called the collective force of terror. This particular being, and she describes really beautifully her healing experience with a kind of portal opening up and what happened. She said it was a 2.5 meter amphibian, and the healing of an old knee injury from football damage at 16 years. A bright white blue light in the bedroom. I saw a hole in the wall with a large room. A laboratory, people in a white lab coats and other beings. A huge box-like object, like an aquarium, covered me from this room, moved over the lower part of my legs and covered me on all sides. Inside this energy box contained a blue energy light. It was so strong it radiated out and was being filled up with white, swirling, silvery smoke. Suddenly, there was a green hand with large scales on the back of the arm, 5 green fingers longer than human ones, nails more like claws, and a little finger was webbed, the feet like frog's feet, and a voice saying, "They showed me this, so I won't be afraid." I asked mentally, "Why are you doing this?" And their answer was, "Because you have our DNA." All the time the DNA comes up, the one mantra, the DNA. I blacked out and awoke with my whole body vibrating. 2 hours later when I woke, my body felt strange and my feet felt like they were standing on air. There was none of the intense pain I felt while walking. The arch of my foot was normal, not flat. All pain and inflammation is gone. So really, really profound experiences. And I'm going to, this is the cone-headed being that is the one that came to do another type of healing, which I'm going to explain to you. Notice the interesting similarity to some of the skulls that are found in various parts of the world. The coneheads and my experience of healing with them, I think I was one of these beings in a past life. Now this is where we're taking it from human experience to post or pre-birth. So we're actually taking it into the spiritual realm. So let's look at the experience that she had. And hopefully this will come up and you can see for yourself.
I woke up staring right into the lower body of a small being. I raised my head and upper body from the bed and leaned my head into my right hand. Immediately I focused my eyes on places in the room, and wondered what this being looked like. I left my body and went to those places in above and behind the being. I could see my body from above, felt so happy, and then I slowly lowered myself down into my body. When I was back and in control of my body, I leaned forward towards the being. He was still standing, healing me with his eyes shut, and I could see the soft glow from the fabric in his suit and every fiber in it.
Fascinating that she remembers, and I want you to just notice this because I'm going to show you a drawing from a lady in Queensland who also sees these cone-headed beings. But look what she said. The room had a green, yellow, white haze. She saw the being, his forehead, there was a white beam, and a 90-degree angle turned over his hands and into her body. He had tight, silvery, light bluish, slim suit and boots of the same colour. So she's got lots of detail. A buckle of clear glass, the shape of a bun with swirling yellow-green strokes, rotating fast, were the cause of the green-yellow light in the room. I was able to leave my body and look at this being from all perspectives. I just knew they were healing me. Now, I will answer questions later, okay?
I just wondered if it was her voice.
No, that wasn't. No, that wasn't her voice. That was just the story. And actually, it was put together by Daniel Verdon, a lovely gentleman who did that whole little movie for me, which was brilliant. So this is what she was saying. There is the image of her being, and sadly you can't see it very well. That was her drawing. And this is what she said. I never experienced fear from any of my encounters. Every night for the following week, I had visits from this being, healing me. I was receiving things that looked like green laser beams, green lines of different lengths, like a Morse code. After this, my healing abilities reached a new level. She felt like thousands of needles were being pressed into them. I began having problems with my computer and electrical devices interfering with the silicon chip of the computers, 60 hertz, so I would try and control it. Now, how many of you, I'm sure, know about getting problems with computers as your energy shifts or whatever? But what was really synchronous, and I find this so many times in my research, within the time I was hearing about this experience, this was sent to me by a lady in Queensland, Heather Patterson, and there is the cone-headed being that she's experienced. Notice the thing at the belt, the green lines, and this script. And this is also really, really important. And I'll explain to you why I think it's so important. And this is more of that script. And as many of you know that know my work, I am very fascinated in the purpose of why we would manifest after experiences certain things. And what was interesting is I sent this script to Dr. Ohlson, and she was able to say some of these actually resonated with her, that she recognized them. So I'm constantly looking for corroboration with some of this material as much as possible. Remember, one's in Sweden, one's in Queensland. They've never communicated, but they are having this similar kind of experience. I'm bringing in the orbs because they are very pertinent to our experiences now, and I want to explain a little bit of this. This one's got a UFO in the middle of it. You can't see it very well here. And this was a family, and it was Dr. Ohlson sent me this. She said the family that experienced this craft coming out of the orb, she said it was a blue sphere the size of a football in the bedroom above the husband's bed. Out of it came a small sphere. When I poked it, it felt like a membrane which broke. An electric green phosphorus colour spread down their arms. We both felt it, she said, and the orb continued to move over my body to my knees. The saucer-shaped object inside the orb was still spinning. And she'd read about accounts, and one of them was in 1966, where the Canadian government had observed such a phenomena before, as a UFO came out of the orb and expanded to be a large UFO and disappeared. It was speculated this phenomena was some kind of time travel device. And I'm going to take you to time travel as well, through the eyes and minds of children. Grant Cameron's a well-known researcher in Canada, and one of the things he sent me was this picture of this orb. And the reason he sent it to me, it's not the full video, because the video they took was quite incredible, because he said there was a large tumour on the back of the neck of the individual. The orb caused this large tumour to disappear on this local experiencer, so it went into the body of the experiencer. And this is a picture of the orb just before it entered the body in the man's bedroom. This whole event was caught on camera, and there was no tumour. So some of these orbs seem to contain some form of craft, and sometimes they can obviously contain either a spirit or perhaps an ET. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more in a minute, or why I believe that. One of the things that's really important here, and why I'm leading into the orbs and also the language, is this. This was very profound for me as a hypnotherapist, using hypnosis for healing, for affirmations, for all these kinds of things. We all know when we hear beautiful music or nice things are said to us, we feel better. We don't actually realize that it may actually be affecting our DNA. And what these scientists, these Russian scientists, have found out, and these are a biophysicist and a biologist, in a book called Networked Intelligence, is this. Human language will interact with living DNA substance. They react to language modulated laser rays and to radio waves if the proper frequencies are used. In other words, it affects our DNA. It can actually alter our DNA. Human language. It explains why affirmations and hypnosis have such powerful effect on human bodies and why we are so influenced by what is said to us, both positive and negative. So that is a really important one, is we are sensitive to words and language and frequency. And I'm going to say why this is really important in this experience as well. The orb phenomena, because we have the kinds of cameras now that can pick up the orbs, there's many different discussions on what they are and what have you. I've got a lot of different accounts, some of them through my hypnosis, but from others, that there's more to the orbs than we realize. And I'm going to show you some interesting clips in a minute about orbs. But this was one of the first times I realized what they may be. And it was from a 15-year-old that I was doing a regression with in the Lake District in England some years ago now. The whole family had been taken up onto a craft. The grandmother, the mother, and the two sons. The grandmother also was really struggling with her experiences and was quite terrified. And so was her 15-year-old grandson. And I remember him saying on the day when it was his turn, after his grandmother, who was feeling amazingly different after the regression, he said, "I wish I'd stayed at school today." He was most unsure about wanting to have this regression. What I discovered with him, though, was once he was in that space, he was basically sorting it out himself. And the first thing is he's having a dialogue with some of the beings in that altered state. And this is what he was saying to them. "Why me? Oh, I chose to do it. I volunteered to come back. I chose to do this. The two greys, they're still with me. They say, stay on track. I have been on Earth 27 times before." He was also told not to take drugs. He was also told to take care of himself. There was lots of other statements that he was dialoguing with this being. But then this was an experience in trance state where he said he was in his garden. And in his garden, this craft landed with the grey beings in his garden. And he said this out loud. "I can see orbs, whitey gold and two smaller ones. They're here to make me feel warm and they are family. The big one is Great Nana and the other Nana's dad, grandfather and granddad's brother. They're here to make me feel comfortable, to reassure me." I asked him how he knew what the orbs of light were, and he said he just knew. I asked him why were they there with him, and he said this: "They've come with the greys to support me, to make me feel comfortable so I wouldn't be frightened." John then said that when the greys left, the orbs of light went into the spacecraft with them. Now this takes it to a whole new level. If we are understanding that these are the souls of his family, what are they doing going on spacecraft afterwards? What does that mean? And always you get one answer when you're diving down this rabbit hole and you're joining the dots, and it only brings up another question. Before I go more into the orbs, there is a sequence to this that I want to explain. Dr. Lena Ohlson also had near-death experiences. And for many of those we're discovering now that have had extraterrestrial contact or interdimensional contact, have had near-death experiences as well. Quite a high percentage, which is really fascinating. And she said this, and this was the experience that she had when she had septicemia, and the doctors said they couldn't believe that she'd actually survived it. And this was what she actually experienced. In this experience, every bit of colour lifted from my body, and when it came to my heart and head, instantly, all pain left, and everything went dark. I felt happy and loved, something I'd never felt before. I thought of my kids. I could scroll back and forth in a sort of tunnel with photos of them. The photos looked at more of the separate and intense as I went into the photos and checked up on the thoughts and feelings the children had and if they were doing okay. I could barely discern the night sky and the stars and experienced overwhelming feeling of love and belonging. And I was there, and then my brain blanked out. When I woke much later, I had a terrible ache in my whole body and thought, oh no, I'm back. And I started to cry. It's amazing how many really struggle to come back into this reality. So this is how she experienced it, and this was due to this, septicemia. The doctors witnessed, agreed it was a miraculous recovery after she was instantly healed from massive sepsis, and her organs actually were undamaged, and this had never been heard before. How could she possibly have got through that without undamaged organs? But the transformation from that point was 6 months after this NDE, she experienced high strangeness, started to perceive auras and energies around people, able to see through solid objects, know when someone's lying, encounter spirits and share messages. The most cherished encounters, she said, are with extraterrestrials, both as visitors, teachers, and healers. Quite a different story to a lot of mainstream. So when we go into this, and this is where I'm going to take you into some of the languages, and I want to just highlight the fact that that DNA is not just about our body. And as a data storage, yes, it's very important that it's that as well. But language, and it just requires the right frequencies to be reprogrammed. You don't have to splice it, change it, alter it. You just need the right languages. And what it's saying here is that the holographic nature of chromosomes is that we can actually modulate certain frequency patterns on this to influence the DNA and thus the genetic information, which is what esoteric and spiritual teachers have known, that our body is programmable by language, words, and thought. Now it's been scientifically proven in this book, which is explaining it from the Russian. If language can alter DNA, what effect would star languages have on human DNA? That's the interesting question. That's something that I've been very keen to explore. And I'm now going to show you something that has two interesting phenomena with it. But first of all, introduce you to this lady, Emma Strong. She's a lady from the US. She was told by the beings that she was only 22% humanoid and the rest was a form of light energy. That's her understanding of herself. When I speak the star languages, I feel I'm giving directives to angels. Every time I take a video from my phone, it records spacecraft. I can be gone for hours. Recently, I woke up with tree material in my hair. I'd not left the house since I washed it. I believe I'm traveling at night to different dimensions, times, and my actual physical body goes, not just the soul. In 2009, I began to awaken once or twice in the night between 1 to 3 a.m. It was as if someone grabbed me and shook me. I can only describe it as similar to a rush of adrenaline or electric current going through my body. Only once did I wake myself speaking another language. Now, one of the interesting phenomena that's happened in the last few years that I've become aware of is certain individuals have been noticed to be speaking these languages in their sleep, including children. I've got one recording where there are 3 different languages spoken by the same gentleman that have been recorded. So it seems like when we're asleep, we are actually dialoguing with something or some intelligence, or they are at least having a dialogue. So it's really interesting to wonder what that's all about. I'm now going to show you a little bit of a video. It's Emma Strong speaking. She's an artist in America, as I said. As she's speaking the star language, you will notice huge amount of activity of orbs at the same time. She records this all the time. It's not special. She said this is something that's happening all the time. But I want you to see it for yourself because it is fascinating. And again, the question is why and what does this mean? So many of you have probably seen the types of orbs. Let me show you the video.
I'm going to take in the language this morning.
You can already see the orb,
Osako atatala chichirani, Okusia, Jodo Teshan, Ototalechi, Ukapataki, Marakushi, the Basil Kitchen, Atatai, Yo Hashu, Anatotoi, Atasatake, Asatate, Ashia, Mono Rochia, Ukichitara Bo Akasa, Ya. Atatushi and a man at a bar, you are to do it. And the dinner to okay. What did I visit of me again? You have to show the lady to the man at a quick. Do you derabatata, at the derabatata, at the derabatata, the new way as in good at a man at Ochichia, Okapapa, soy, Atashia, Nano, Yata to Quay at a joy. After the person of Kitchi to the Menedo Tishi to the Tijo, Yana, do a catasote, Asatala Menedo to the Beziloke, as a derabazoke, Tito Manatote, at the Genie Manatote. At the Gigi Manatote, Gigi Tarani, said, go, I ask you to bring daughter Shittermane, Papa, Uniato, oh, yeah, your daughter, Yerakisha, and Yarade. Oka, the Diana, okay, or the Dipos, you are a kind Nancy, as the Dipazuri, as the Diga, I Nancy to the Bita toy, Doka.
Can you see the orbs? Some of them are quite obvious.
Akayato amana ahia hoki de digi do mani shokatate atata nia shokatate aya amando to the betitore as a go to the battle today after the minute of the digit like you meet to the bezekotore do atata ki as a mazoroti atto okay as a bezero qui c'era la meneroce kato to sintitore as a little bit roci ter via che ci dà la madara rogere do che ci dà ayo ati
Fascinating, isn't it? So what is that interaction going on? Who is she speaking to? But also with a lot of the star languages, and there are many, many different types. Many are very, very distinct. Some of them apparently you can translate in a linear fashion. Others cannot be translated in that way at all. They're like packets of information. So you're not actually able to translate them. One of the gentlemen that spoke to me that speaks what he says is star language, but also old earth languages as well, like Lemurian, which is quite fascinating because he said he was one of those that interfaced with many different ET races, not just on planet Earth before, but also in star systems. And he can talk, I think it's about 5, and he has the names of them. He's explicit in how he understands them. And he's got another gentleman in the US that actually he can converse with. They both know exactly what they're saying to one another. So what is this? What is it saying to us? And one of my feelings is that if we're getting close to open contact, however that is, then we're going to need those that interface, those that actually can understand what's going on before we actually get to with what I appear some are telepathic communication. That is fascinating, but she's not the only one. She's one of so many that write to me, send me clips of language and what have you. And you notice that a lot of it is changing. She's actually got emotion, she's got expression, and some of them apparently are felt, that you actually feel the energy and the frequency. So what is it doing? Is it affecting our DNA in the way other words affect us? So I'm just putting that out for you to think about, because I want to know what the mystery means too. But it certainly is, it can have a profound effect. And when I was playing these languages in one particular forum, one of the ladies afterwards came up to me, she was a nurse, and she said, Mary, look what I've just done. And she said after I heard those languages, she had to get a piece of paper out, and she found herself then writing script, which she'd never ever done before. So something in that language had changed her consciousness in some way. So we're still not quite sure what it all means, but it's very, very interesting. And one of the reasons I put, some of you may be aware that I showed Rochelle Deila writing a script and then showing also with the language how she did healing on various levels of that person, that individual. She said those were frequencies of a soul level. I've had some very intuitive people tell me that they got healing frequencies from that as well. So the experience was one of healing. So we still don't fully understand. But if you've seen Rochelle and what she was doing, I'm now going to show you Emma Strong doing it. And what is great about this is she tells you the process of what she's feeling as she starts to write this script. Because I do believe that, and one of the things that constantly has amazed me, maybe because of the way I think, and I'm very much thinking out the box and always have done, was all of this can't be ignored. You can't say, well, that's just rubbish. If you're doing something like this after an encounter or encounters, it's got to mean something, even if we don't yet understand what it is. But let me show you how she does the writing, which I think is fascinating.
I'm going to try to hold this camera like this, but it'll be shaking and moving, but I don't know how else to get the whole picture in. But this is me writing, and I don't meditate or anything, it just comes in.
You can see it's very fast. There's no thought there. Tracy Taylor did a similar script, Rochelle Dealer, and many others have sent me script like this. So it's actually a lot more common than perhaps you'd realize. Some are drawing symbols, and I'll talk a little bit more about that with the children. But I've also had children that can translate some of this script, and I'll talk about that in a minute. She'll actually explain her process in a minute.
Then I turn it over just to give my hand more support, so I write in this direction. I don't think it matters to them where it stops and where it ends, because like I said, like I've told before, it tends to it goes someplace once I get it down on paper, and I don't think it matters if I tear up the paper. Apparently the writing, or what is said in the writing's always going to be. It just is, and it's already recorded. It's almost sort of backhand, and it sort of has changed over the years. But that's the writing. See, it more or less goes that way or that way. And they put a lot of dots. For some reason, I'm dotting things in there, and I'm not quite sure why that is, unless there's extra emphasis, or it's like, I don't know, that it could be a period at the end of the sentence. But anyway, that's my writing, and I do have to hold the pen sometimes more or less. It's easiest to hold it like this, because I have more. If I were to write like this, you have to move like this, and that's not how they're grabbing it. They're wanting to use my whole, a lot more of this rather than this sort of thing. And it gives me better control, because it seems like they grab the pen and it just is taken control of. But I can't tell if it's like perhaps an outside source, or if it's actually just me, my higher self, doing it. Okay.
The process is quite fascinating to me, and what she's experiencing. And that's what I'm taking note of when I hear others and I'm asking about their process. This is another example, but this one is quite interesting, because this lady has seen a progression from this more artistic kind of form to something very similar to Emma Strong, and she's actually saying what's happening. And what she had managed to discover was, with this physicist, she sent her material to this physicist, and he said many of these glyphs are actually formulas on their way to forming matter. Now that's a very interesting interpretation. And here she's saying these are two of her earlier types of script. As you can see, some of it is very, very pretty and very unusual, but very pretty. And she said this is how she understands them. Light formulas and cosmic language transmissions. It's hard for me not to sing, as singing the frequencies are an integral part of the transmission. These languages carry billions of bits of information in a bridge format. Human language is linear. Speaking, singing, light language feels spiral and wave-like. Sensations of being awash with layers of knowing that is understood but cannot be articulated in a linear word string. Advanced beings use telepathy or direct thought transference. And I'm going to let you hear just an example of what she's talking about.
Plus no more jana mama, kia aina, tosi ama, taya, omo naiki, istinata oma, ka tiati, echeka, astamotea, defne botui.
That's just an example of her understanding of one type of light language. Some of them can speak many different types of light language. And getting back to the script, and I'll give you something else that intrigued me, was this is a recent image that Deborah had done. And she was actually saying to me, it's all changed and it's got very much more script-like as she's let go of old programs. Now that's the interesting thing for me. As she's let go of a lot of the old programs of her human experience, her scripts change and is upgraded, including, she said, lots of dots, which if you remember Emma Strong was talking about. And she said it's changed from glyph-like pictogram drawings to different scripts, fast, fluid writing with lots of dots, similar to Emma Strong. I'm told to go back and add more dots and even long, thin, flowing lines. Then there is a corner line intersecting light codes. I experience sadness, the light codes becoming so script-like, moving from artistic expression. I feel this has occurred with my expansion in consciousness and receiving information which requires being so close to the style of what human term writing. It's like streams of frequencies in condensed, smaller expressions in barely 3D format perception. So she's changing in consciousness. It seems to be an accelerated shift away from human patterning. It's been very intense. I find that others are experiencing much the same. So it's a progression of awakening to her new consciousness. She realized she was being shown 3 significant patterns created a triad of blockage that kept me bound in karmic manipulation on this planet, obviously. It was described that neediness programs such as distortions of authentic, unadulterated receptivity, a cluster of negative money programs, distortions of authentic, unadulterated prosperity distortions, of authentic, unadulterated power. These refer to the receptivity, prosperity, and power we are all born with, and also the basic tenets of how the universe operates. So she's basically letting go of many of the things that drive us in a 3D world. And that's how it is, I'm understanding it. We are all moving to let go of those old limiting 3D, limiting and limited understandings of what reality is. So let's see where it's taking us. I'll keep an eye on the time. We'll be ready for a cup of tea in a minute, I suspect. The new human. Before I take you there, I've got one other thing I want to say. When I was doing a regression with a beautiful lady in Melbourne, she was, when she contacted me, she was 66 years old. She had chronic back issues. She knew from her doctor she was headed for a wheelchair. She said to me, I had this strange experience one night where I woke up the next morning, I had this levitated feeling, woke up the next morning, she said all my electronic equipment was dead, all the batteries were dead. She had no idea why. And when she started to get up and she was ready for her medication, sometimes she took morphine because it was so bad, she found she could get up and she could move around and couldn't quite work out what was going on. Why did she feel better? Why was she able to move? She even didn't have she had a bed downstairs because she couldn't go up the stairs anymore because it was so bad. Still couldn't work out what happened, but she knew something major had shifted. So what happened was that finally she asked me to help her understand what had occurred for this amazing shift in her. And when we did a regression, she was taken up onto a craft. She was taken to her home, which was off-planet. She was shown where she came from. And the reason I'm telling you this is two important reasons. When she was on the craft, some of the things she was learning on a huge screen was script, just like you've seen on the spacecraft. That was what she was learning. She was also told that she needs to get on with her mission and that they'd fixed her up because now it was time for her mission. And what is so fascinating, I saw her only about 18 months ago when I went back to Melbourne. This woman, you would not believe, was headed for a wheelchair. She's got more energy than I have, certainly. She just says, I don't even want to go to sleep before 11 o'clock at night. She's liaising with other scientists to do with GMOs, chemtrails and whatever. Her awareness, her scientific awareness has been totally accelerated. She said, my children would never guess or never know how it's happened. I can't tell them. But she was 66 thinking her life was over. She's 69 and she's just beginning. So that is, that one to me was I wrote the article Never Too Late. So any of you that are in that kind of generational thing, don't think it's over for you by any means, because you just don't know. If you've come here with something to do, I feel like you're not going to get away with it by just saying I'm in my 60s or 70s, because maybe, just maybe, this is the start for you and you don't realize it yet. And I think it's really important for that reason, because I meet many starseeds all over the world, and some of them are the older generations. And I've come to understand it doesn't really matter what age you are, because if you've come here with something to do, you'll do it. And that is, to me, a wonderful example of that, because she literally is liaising with scientists now. They don't know who she is, and she can't tell them who she is or how she knows what she knows, because she doesn't even know how she knows what she knows. So there you go. And I think it's a really inspiring story, and it's one of many I could tell you. But here we have Dr. Ohlson. She's a younger generation, always knowing that she was different, always knowing she was one of the letter people. And she calls it the quantum evolving species. And this is what she says, and this is the awareness of her generation and those as we get younger and younger as well. I came down to inhabit a human body as I have done many times before. That is her awareness, and I'm going to tell you accounts of children that have conscious past life memories of who they are. And I'm going to go more into that in a minute. I'll keep an eye on the time. So let's look at what she calls the letter people. In my second book, The New Human, I mention a lot of these children. I mention the fact that these children are called crystal children, indigo children, children of light by metaphysical groups. But I feel they're missing one significant part of these new generations of children, new aware children and whatever. And part of that is the ET component. And this is very, very important, because the DNA side of this and the education they get are with these extraterrestrials. So this is what she's saying about letter people. And we're talking here about those that are considered ADHD, Asperger's, dyslexia, some forms of autism, and the qualities that they have are not being recognized, but instead being seen as a dysfunction. And this has intrigued me, because I couldn't work out, if you have someone being upgraded who's had experiences, for example, why would they then have a child that's ADHD? Or why would they have a child that's Asperger's or whatever? Because those are challenges in society. They are challenged in society. So why? Why would that be? And this was part of the conclusion I came to. This is what Dr. Ohlson interprets that as. And I am going to also mention another scientist that agrees with her. I believe these programs such as ADD, ADHD, Asperger's, the letter people, I do not believe these are broken genes, but instead offering a new, multidimensional skills to prevent limited reprogramming of a third dimensional reality. It's harder to program them. Isn't that great? It's not so simple as foreign DNA. It's a combination of genetically improved bodies in combination with souls from different places in our universe, incarnating in these improved bodies. The souls have different frequencies, vibrations, depending on their evolutionary status, and that plays a role in activation of the DNA in that particular body. I believe we also have to take into account the collective soul of Homo sapiens. So this is really, really complex. Later people show an impairment in communication between brain halves and thus use one side of the brain for solving the same problem. They say we are dysfunctional. However, it may be a way to free more space in the brain for solving difficult tasks. The Asperger part might be responsible for higher knowledge, not interested in traditional learning. Now that is really fascinating because I remember speaking to an Asperger's gentleman many, many years ago, and I always feel you get clues during your life to help you understand things, and he was a big clue for me because he said, you know, they say that we are not able to socialize. And he said, amongst ourselves, we have absolutely no problem at all. He says the reason we struggle with socializing normally, he said, because of the masks of people. He said they've always got masks. They're not being honest. They're not true to who they really are. And we can't be bothered with that. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? The enhanced senses has led a person the new programs. Scientific tests show above normal sensitivity. Now, because she's a scientist, she's able to look at this from both her left brain scientific mind and her experience herself. And this is what she noticed in herself and tested for. Above normal sensory cells for pressure in her skin. She hears above the normal and below the normal range. She's aware of minute differences in the shades of colour than normal. Taste and smell are enhanced. She's sensitive to all frequencies and would feel overwhelmed at times by the sensory overload. Sensitivity to radioactive radiation, energy fields and energies beaming out of angry people, as well as love and happiness. If we could learn how to focus, she says, and control our own energy field, we would be less prone to get ill from our surroundings. We can use our own self-healing abilities. Which is really interesting, isn't it? So this is the qualities and why so many of these new programs struggle, because of their heightened sensitivity. For the old models like me, I'm looking at the world like this and think I've got a handle on it. They're looking at their reality like this, and you're wondering why they struggle. When we're saying, actually, it's just this. Well, in fact, they're saying, no, it isn't. It's all of this as well. But we're trying to get them to focus like this. And we shut them down, don't we, with Ritalin or whatever. And this is the point that I'm trying to make. This beautiful lady, no longer with us, Dolores Cannon. Many of you may know of her. She's an amazing, or was amazing lady. She passed on probably just over a year and a half ago. Wrote many, many books. Some, The Convoluted Universe, where she had done regressions on hundreds and hundreds of people and was then writing the information from those regressions. From people all over the globe. I mean, she traveled all over the globe. I met her numerous times. I was we became really good friends, and we spoke at similar conferences actually as well. A delightful lady. It was in her 80s when she finally passed on. And this was one of the interesting things that came up time and time again from those regressions. And remember, you know, when you do regressions, not everyone is hyper aware, not everyone has this understanding. But what comes out through altered states of information can be mind-blowing. And I can testify to that, and so can Mariana Flynn, who does the same work. And this is one of the things that stuck with me. When humankind reaches critical mass, DNA will be expanded to 12 strands. Now, what is the evidence for that? And I'm going to go more into that in a minute. I'm going to give for the next 20 minutes, and then I'm going to go more into it. But what I would say is this. Some of you may know Robert Dean. He's now in his 80s, well known in ufology. He was the grandfather, I think, of ufology. He was aware of the military cover-up in the 1960s, and he knew that the military knew about a number of different species visiting this planet. He spent a long time over the years coming to the point where he said, you know, people need to know this. It was only in recent years that he admitted he'd been taken up on craft. Command Sergeant Robert Dean, look him up if you don't know him. He's the most beautiful man and most aware man. I was fortunate to meet him for the first time in Brisbane many years ago now, and I met him since. One of the things he said in one of his interviews was he was told that we are a combination of 12 different extraterrestrial species. 12. Isn't it interesting? Isn't this interesting? And I'm the kind of person, you know, that if information or fact is interesting, I sort of put it on, you know, like a squirrel. I put it in a box and say it might be useful someday, and somehow or other I might pull it out and say, oh, you might fit there. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But those are the kinds of things that intrigue me, is when you get these little synchronicities, as I call them. But I found that quite fascinating, that this is what he was saying. I now have other information from some of the children that will qualify that, and that is another thing. So let's take it to another molecular biologist, and this is Dr. William Brown. I was very fortunate to connect with him with exopolitics, and when I was talking about the new children, and something Tracy Taylor had said many, many years prior, just before 2000, about these new children coming in with accelerated DNA, etc., and awakening, I was, you know, very fascinated with that, but I had nothing really tangible from what I call the scientific community at that point, until I had the fortune to meet Dr. William Brown. And he's making some incredible statements here, absolutely incredible statements. What have you got? I believe genetic modification is occurring right now in utero and are actually producing new humans. Their new genetic architecture allows them to see the world in a multidimensional fashion. I believe dormant genetic regions are being integrated into the biological systems and occurring in all of us to produce expanded awareness. The exponential increase in ADD, autistic and indigo children, their brains work faster. I believe they already know what they are being taught. The intrinsic understanding of knowledge and information operates at a biomolecular level. It's transgenerational information. It is encoded within the atomic structure of the DNA molecule. It can be accessed more efficiently to produce savant-like characteristics. The modification of the DNA is more like a remodeling of the genome to make dormant regions accessible again. The hybrids are altogether a new species of human. Isn't it fascinating? Isn't that fascinating? Encoded in the DNA. What were we talking about? We haven't even begun to understand the properties of DNA. What still may be there? What is still encoded in our DNA? We haven't yet fully understood that. And this is another gentleman I met some years ago, a lovely gentleman in Hong Kong. He runs a UFO group there, and I went to see him some years ago now, and he was, I was able to speak at Hong Kong University, which was interesting, caused a bit of a dilemma within the academic community when I started talking about UFOs. ADHD, you know how he interprets his experience? He said to me that he didn't know he was even ADHD till he was in his 50s. He then realized that that's what it was, that they label these kinds of awareness. His name for it is always dialed into higher dimensions. Brilliant. I absolutely love it. And this is what he wrote in his book, Close Encounters of the ADHD Kind. The universe is a multiverse with many more dimensions than we are aware of. My book is about what happened in my extra-dimensional world where I met the beings of light. I tell them that, being symptomatic of ADHD, I am not limited to the square template of the universe. I'm wired to the multidimensional universe. My internet browser can browse into chaos, be it on Earth or the multiverse. I can perceive hidden layers of order and make sense of it all. Most folk, without a supercharged browser, cannot do this. They are focused towards convention in this reality. Isn't that fascinating? Gets you to think a little bit more differently about some of these children that are labelled. And I'm wanting to give you a different perspective. Make up your own mind at the end of the day whether or not this resonates with you or not. But this, for me, was really fascinating. I'm now going to talk about a younger generation. And this is a young lady I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to let her tell you her story, and then we'll have a nice cup of tea or something. The new generations of human. This young lady contacted me from the UK. She's a student in Bristol, I think it was. And she had some unusual photographs and things happening to her. As you can see, there's strange markings here. She said she saw images in photographs of shadows, smoky apparitions. She said she's very spiritual. She sees strange beings, sightings of UFOs with the family. marks on the body, bruises, writing, scars, strange marks on her thighs that look like writing. She has abilities like telekinesis, and she's going to show you an example of her telekinesis. Auras, precognition, clairaudience, also noting that things happen when she thinks of them. Sees numbers, you know, the 1111s and 22s. I feel I have spirit guides and dreams of animals that talk to me and ready to help. Owls, eagles, black dog, etc., etc. I had bruises on my legs overnight, precise scratches, incisions on my shin and shoulder overnight. This was the image she sent to me, this strange smoky image round her throat. She wanted to know what it was. And this is what she said. I've always had paranormal experiences since a child. I had black smoke attached to my throat in the picture. I zoomed in to the smoke and saw green alien faces, reptilian-looking creatures, a dragon, an angry, demonic-looking creature. I have also heard my name whispered at night in my room around the time I took the picture. I also have different tones of ringing in the ears. In my right ear was not like any other. It sounded like really bad feedback from a microphone facing a speaker, but more rippled like it had a fast vibration, as if something they would use in an alien effect movie. Now she's describing a huge and wonderful set of, if you like, experiences. And what I love about that is I'm sure there are a number of you in this room that can relate to so much she has to say. So I'll let her speak for herself. She's a wonderful young lady, and she will tell you in her own way her story and also show you evidence of her telekinesis, and then we'll have a break.
Hello, my name is Sharon. Before I start this video, I just want to thank Mary very much for giving me this opportunity and for taking the time to listen to me and answer my questions about these paranormal experiences I'm having. The reason why I started sending her why I was looking for answers is because my experiences are now becoming evidence, as I captured something on a picture, but I'll talk about that later in the end of the video. So first I'll talk about who I am quickly. I'm 22 years old. I live in the UK. I just finished studying a 3-year Bachelor Honours course at university, which was a music course. I produce, sing, and record music. I was born and bred in Holland, but I moved to the UK about 8 years ago. So, yeah. Mary asked me to make this video about the paranormal experiences I've had really quickly and the ability I have. So, I'll start off with the paranormal experiences. Okay, I've had a lot of experiences with interdimensional beings. I don't know exactly what they were, but you know, poltergeist and hearing, seeing, and everything. I've seen all that kind of stuff. It wasn't just me, my family experiences this till this day. We've had all sorts of experiences in every house we've lived in. So it wasn't just a house, it was everywhere we went. I've heard the whispers in my room and my name being called out and stuff like that. Over a period of time. It started from Holland and it still happens about 2 weeks ago or a week ago. I've seen duplicates of my family members. For example, I would see someone walking and then disappear somewhere when it's not. It's like someone was trying to impersonate one of my family members, but it wasn't really them, and it showed themselves but then disappeared. Or I would look away and I wouldn't see them anymore, which was really strange. UFOs. Seen a lot of them many times. My whole family has seen a lot of them. I am so into it, so I see it so many times. Like, we've seen the lights, and we've seen the lights in the sky, and we've also seen the actual objects. I've seen different ones. I've seen big ones, I've seen small ones, and it's really cool. I'm gonna start filming that and putting it. So interesting. Yeah, so a lot of things happened to all of us in our family. Also, I started waking up with body marks, like bruises and cuts on my leg and on my body, writing in my thigh, which was really weird. It looked like a radiation mark. I still have a lot of answers to find or get, because I really want to know what this is. Also, I'm a very spiritual person. I started becoming spiritual around in 2012. I started buying crystals and stuff like that. And once I did that, once I got into that, that's when things started becoming more amplified. That's when I started getting the marks on my body, and that's when more things started happening. Yeah, so the reason I contacted Mary was because I found a black apparition in a picture that I took for my hair length. It was attached onto my throat, and I couldn't make sense of it when I saw it, so I zoomed in, I brightened it up, and it was like smoky, weird thing attached to me. And in that smoky apparition, there were faces, a lot of them, like skulls and alien faces, a dragon, believe it or not, it's there, reptilian, demonic creatures, because they didn't look really friendly, those demonic creatures. But a lot of things, and I was so happy that I captured it. I was so happy. As much as people would say I have to be worried because it was attached on my throat, it's black and it had like demonic entities in there. I loved it because I finally captured something, and it was evidence. It's like the best evidence I've ever captured for myself, and it was so exciting. But obviously, I was like, okay, it might be a bit worrying because I don't know what's going on. But yeah, I just want to know what it is, what it wants from me, how long it's been around me, if it's just a coincidence. I don't think it is, or if I'm supposed to do something. I just want to know. And I'm still trying to look for those answers. So my psychic abilities, the abilities that I have that usually people don't really use, is I can do telekinesis, so I can move things with my mind. My sister showed me a video of people doing telekinesis, so I tried it and I was really interested because I never thought of that idea really. I did it, and then the first time I tried it, it worked, it was successful. So then I started practicing and doing it more and doing it more, and I started filming myself. So I have that all on camera. The other abilities that I don't want to say are really abilities, I just have them sometimes. I can see aura lines sometimes. I'm not a professional or anything. I could just, usually I used to walk past people or objects or doors or anything, and then I would see a white line that's about 20 inch, not 20, sorry. That's about 2 inches away from the object. And I would say, I would be annoyed because I never knew what it was. I thought my eyes were playing with me, but I think I could just see the energy field around it. Also, I can see colors around people sometimes. Yeah, like, I can see auras, but not that well yet. I still have to get into that. Dreams, sometimes I have dreams that happen. Like, there are messages in the dream, and it's, for example, I have my spirit animals that talk to me. So I know one of their names, but they actually give me advice and warnings of something that's actually happening or that's gonna happen. Also, I had a dream recently about an airplane that crashed in Asia somewhere, and it was a white airplane that crashed on like a bridge and went into the river. They were survivors, but I was having the same kind of dream, and the same wing broke in my dream as it did in real life. And the same morning, it was all over the news. So I felt like I was connected to that for some reason, but I don't know why. So it's such things that I could say that happened, and I'm like, it's a bit psychic. Oh, there's one more thing. I know I believe in the law of attraction, and I've experienced it and everything, but sometimes, a lot of the times I've experienced this is why it's on my mind, that sometimes or a lot of the times when I think of something or have an idea that's all been on my mind, it starts becoming popular, or it happens somewhere else in another country, and it hasn't happened for years. Like, out of nowhere it starts happening. I almost feel like my mind is in charge of things that happen sometimes. I don't know what it is, and I want to know what it is, because it's just strange. It's cool but strange. I would like to know if anyone has any intel on that. So yeah, listening, and I would be very interested if people know about any of these things I just mentioned in this video. If you might have answers, or if you're going through some similar experiences, I would love to speak with you, and I would love to I just am. So please contact me, or go to my YouTube channel called Supernatural.
I think Sharon did a great job, don't you, in terms of explaining the matrix of what she was experiencing, and all of it from her intuitive side and what have you. For those that are interested, that's what she's talking about. That was what she saw in her dream, and some of you may be aware of this particular incident because she described it in absolute detail, and I actually looked it up because I remember it being on the news, and that was exactly what happened the next day. So I found that really quite fascinating, that she had it in such a... And precognition is very much part of this. Telekinesis, telepathy, all those kinds of things, we're hearing more and more, and the young people particularly are finding this is part of it. And what I loved about the whole thing was a part of her was finding it a bit spooky, but another part of her was just intrigued and wanting proof. I actually found it was there, and I could see it, and I got a photograph of it, because that gave her confirmation that it was a reality and what have you. So for me, she is an amazing example of what I call one of the new generations that are starting to experience their multidimensional selves and wanting to understand. And after the break, which is for half an hour, we're going to go into the new ones. These new children, born with full awareness of terrestrial consciousness. I'm going to talk about some of these new babies. And this is what Tracy Taylor told me 10 years before Dr. William Brown and Dr. Lena Ohlson. These conscious awareness of these new babies increasing to override dominant conditioning and programming that occurs from birth. The DNA of the new human has tenfold the amount of information. Things like telepathy, manipulation of time and space, non-verbal communication are all conscious abilities. It's natural, learning skills and abilities advanced. Their molecular structure allows the cells of the body to vibrate faster. Everything is accelerated, including the immune systems. So when you come back and you've had a nice cup of tea, we'll go a little bit more into that. Thank you for now. Links, the way they're changing, their understanding of who they are, why they've come. It takes in what they say about their past lives, how they understand why they've come, and I'm going to go into that with you as well. So are the lights all right and what have you? Are we good? Okay. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a taste of why I really value what these children have been telling either their parents or have actually spoke to me about their experiences. And I find that's a real privilege because you know what children are like, they're talking about things that they're trying to understand or they understand. And, for them, I remember one lady saying, my daughter's so excited that you're interested in listening to her experience. And I felt very privileged that she felt safe enough to tell me her story. So let's start off with some of the qualities. Now, this doesn't just mean the new generations here, because many of you in this room will know you've experienced some of these. And I'm going to tell you a very profound little anecdote that I think will set the scene. I was in Scandinavia last year. I did 4 countries in 4 weeks, which was very stressful, to say the least, but also very rewarding. What I did discover in Scandinavia, however, and I think I mentioned this, that despite their technological advancement there and how advanced they are in many ways, with this kind of experience, in fact, it isn't the same. They have to be very, very careful about who they speak to, who will accept them. When I did my presentation that I did in Copenhagen, and then I actually did it in Norway, I was actually quite worried about my presentation because a lot of it was still the nuts and bolts. And I thought, given how it's not safe to talk about this in the way that other things are, I was quite concerned that it would be too much for people and whatever. But that was my presentation, so I ended up trusting. There were 2 things that came from that in Norway. First of all, the emotional reaction that I got to that information that I didn't expect. And then afterwards, as I walked out of the auditorium, this lady came up to me and she said, "I'm 79 years old. You are the first person in my life that has spoken about everything I've experienced all my life. Nobody has ever mentioned this to me before." And she said, "I'm a farmer's wife and I have brought the sheep in with my mind and nobody knew how I did it." But she was in tears because this was the very first time anyone had mentioned the kinds of things I'm mentioning you today. And for her, it was absolute validation that she was okay. And it's an amazing story because she was born before the Second World War. So it is relevant to many of the older generations, even if it's not been acceptable. So let's go through some of the things that the new children, but also many of you, I think it will be relevant to. And let's look at that. Here we go. Awakening to our cosmic heritage. This is what the new book is really about, us waking up. And the children are here to help us do it. This is what they tell me when I speak to them. And this is a little bit, there's little images of the book cover, actually, by the way. I met a beautiful gentleman when I was in Leeds, at Exopolitics Leeds, a beautiful artist, wonderful, huge pictures. And I looked at his work and I thought, I know who's going to do the cover of my next book. And it's a young gentleman who's in the building trade but an artist. And he's done some incredible work, Lloyd Canning. So he's agreed to do the cover. And already I'm really excited about that. But anyway, pre-birth and past life recall on Earth or other planets. This is conscious recall with a lot of these children. Sense of mission, many of you already know about. Connection to other star systems and other intelligences. Again, I'm going to go into a bit of detail there. Awareness of being taught on spacecraft, numerous multidimensional skills, and I'm going to explain what some of the children say they can do. Connection and communication with all sentience, both animal and plants, and I'm also going to mention a young boy who told his mother he could communicate with a meteor, and I'm going to just throw that one in for you as well. Telepathy and telekinesis abilities, thought influencing, just like Lena spoke about. It was a similar story with this 79-year-old lady in Norway. She said that she had a similar experience, that she could influence the children so that they actually couldn't see her. But it was in a shopping centre where, in fact, the story went, she actually sent me the story, where she was in a shopping centre and she found all the frequencies so difficult to deal with that she pulled her frequency in to a point where she just didn't want to experience anything. And she went up to the counter to pay for something, and the lady behind the counter looked at her blankly, and it was like not seeing anything. She realised that she'd made herself invisible. And she had to bring her energy back so that the woman could see her, and it scared the living daylights out of the woman because suddenly she could see her. So this is what I mean, and this is a 79-year-old lady. She didn't know what she'd done. It actually freaked her out as well. So thought influencing, healing abilities, resonance to truth. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about how the children know what's true and know when they're being lied to, which we really need on this planet right now, as you well know. Operating at higher frequencies, an awareness of manipulation, conspiratorial information, such as the covert agencies that are influencing a lot of these children. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that as well. But before I start, one of the things that has been quite amazing to me is the numbers of parents that have written to me about their children and about how they know they're having encounters. But of course, many of them are experiences themselves. Now, this is a particular instance, and I'd like you to hear it from the mother's perspective to start with, because this lady brought her son to see me at 8 years old because he said that he had had experiences, and she picked it up because of her own experiences when she was a child. She told me quite bluntly that, you know, she was adopted, and the family that she was living with actually threatened her if she talked about it anymore, she'd be sent back to the orphanage. So she was terrified of ever experiencing this. And when her son started to have experiences, it was like, is he really having them? And ultimately she said to him, are things happening for you? Because he was doing all these amazing drawings. And he looked at her and he said, you mean I'm not crazy? Now, when you've got a child under 10 asking whether or not he's crazy, what are we doing as a society? What are we doing to our kids? So I want you to listen to her story because I think it's quite profound in how she articulates it.
And why this one's an important
This one, this is my mum's one, so she's better explaining it than me.
Okay.
When I was a child,
This is a
my
being
imaginary
his
friend,
mother
I had
sees.
two imaginary friends. This is actually my imaginary friend from when I was a child, and it wasn't until my older children started to watch Teletubbies that I actually went, oh, that looks like my imaginary friend. And now whenever I see this fellow, I get a very nice warm feeling. I feel very, very affectionate towards this guy. I feel like I want to pick him up and hug him. And my other imaginary friend, whose name was Nisa, had a very particular necklace on and a band around her head, and very bright, sometimes blue, sometimes green eyes, and very dark hair. And she's also a little bit further in the book, Nisa. And it wasn't actually until I was older, I'd actually forgotten her name, and it wasn't until after I'd been here and spoken to you and saw the picture that all of a sudden her name just popped back into my head, as if it had always been there. And of course it had, but I guess, blocked it out.
I mean, what do you feel when, you know, you're hearing some of this now? You know?
Initially, I was very angry.
Okay. What was the anger about?
The anger was because I've always felt very different to other kids when I was growing up. I never really connected very much with other kids my age, because I always felt that other children were very frivolous. I guess that's maybe not the right word, but just I felt like I was different to them, that I knew more stuff that they didn't understand. Not that makes me sound vain, but not that I was being vain, just that I had a sense that I was a very different child to them. I didn't have the same interests as them. I was very much interested in science and astronomy and all those kinds of things, and just very different, and experiences that would happen to me when I was a child, where I would disappear for hours. Hours would disappear on me. And I'd have dreams where I was actually going to another place, although not really knowing where I was going. But they weren't dreams. They were quite real. And it used to make me feel very alienated from my friends because I was very different. And Paul was also having these experiences. I was angry that I felt someone was coming into my home. And this is my child. Were coming into my home and perhaps doing things with him and taking him places that were labelling him as being a different child. Which is why when he said before not telling people, I
just about in. I don't actually mind them taking me.
No, well that's fine, but to start, well I'm fine with that now, but to start with I was very angry that you're my child, and how dare you come into my house and take my child from his bed when he's supposed to be sleeping, and he's got a big day at school tomorrow, and because it is quite upsetting to him, not upsetting as in scary, but it's upsetting because he gets tired, and a tired child just throws the whole family.
So in that sense, very understandably, as a mum, you're saying, you know, that there's something else going on here that I've got no control over.
Exactly, it was the lack of control that was quite disturbing to me.
And also being left with a grumpy
child
at the end of it. But what you were saying, Paul, is that you actually, yourself, you didn't mind? You didn't mind this happening?
Yeah, I didn't really mind.
Okay, so how do you feel when you hear him say that?
I'm okay with it now.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess I was okay with it to start with because I had no sense of really being hurt by that.
Yeah.
When I was a child, I just had a sense of being different.
Yeah.
And different's not always bad. Different is good in a lot of ways.
But it can be difficult when you're a child.
Very difficult when you feel very different to other kids. And I think I was concerned, which is why she mentioned before about not mentioning it to too many people. I didn't want him to be labelled as being a different child because my childhood was quite affected by the fact that I didn't have a lot of friends because I was very strange. I was considered very strange.
So when did you actually finally discover that this was happening for your son? What age was it when you finally worked out that this was actually going on for him?
I actually suspected with his two older brothers that things may have been happening with his two older brothers, but I didn't really broach it with him. It was only when things started happening around the house with Paul that I really could, and the pictures that he was drawing, that I really had to sit down and say, look, this is not just my imagination, something is happening here. And I guess also the sense that I'm an adopted child as well, and I made contact with my adopted brother, my brother who was my full brother, and he had very similar experiences when he was a child as well, very similar descriptions of things that he's seen and other beings that he's had contact with as well, that I started thinking, well, maybe this is going down a family line. And then when I actually said to Paul, can you tell me, has this ever happened to you? He went very quiet, and I said, can you tell me what's happening? And he told me that some of the things that he's experienced, and I said, how do you feel about that? And he said, you mean I'm not going crazy? He said, so I'm not going crazy. And I think that's when I really understood that yes, it was happening for him the way it did for me, because I thought I was going crazy when I was a child as well. Time disappearing and strange.
Really interesting, isn't it? The mother's perspective. And he's fine with it, but she's not. And it's very understandable, and this is the kind of concerns that I will get from parents, and I wanted you to hear it from the mother's perspective, and when she finally works out that this is happening to Paul. And he's okay with it, by the way. It's just mum isn't. And so I think it just gives you a sense, and the parents in this room will know exactly her concerns, because I'm sure it may very well have been theirs as well. And when someone writes to me, that's some of the things that they're saying is, this is what's happening, and I'm not okay with it for one reason or another. So the child, though, can have a different perspective. This young man, one of the other things I will say is that this book you're seeing here, the image you saw was from that book, and Nisa is actually also in this book, which was her imaginary friend as well, her guide. And this lady burst into tears because she couldn't believe that her guide and her imaginary friend was in this book as well. So, what are the odds of that? This is something that was produced in the US, and not only did she see one of her imaginary friends, but she saw a woman, which she described in this book as well, and she was actually so emotional, she couldn't actually believe that's what she was seeing. So it's validation that often is the most powerful of all when you're coming into acceptance that this is a reality. The young man, Paul, these are the beings, the mantis beings that he sees and are his family. And he's talked to me about the fact that he's been on the craft, and on the craft occasionally he evaporates into his mantid form. And I said, how do you feel about that? And he said, it's a bit different, but he wasn't particularly fussed. And it was quite interesting that I discovered there was a gentleman in England, Simon Parkes, who also said that when he goes on the craft, he will move into a manted form for a time. Now, you may think that's very, very unusual and maybe it's very rare. Well, I've discovered it's not so rare as you think. I now have a number of cases. One of them, a young lady who told me that when she's on the craft sometimes, she was explaining that she was in a grey Zeta body as a scientist. And I said to her, so what are you doing? She said, I'm doing work in this form. And I said, well, where's your human body? And she said, oh, it's sort of over there, like waiting for me, just waiting for her like a container. And I said, well, how do you get from this form back into this one? And she described a ball of light, think of the orbs again, ball of light going back and reanimating her physical human container. And then I spoke to an 8-year-old only recently, and it was something the mother hadn't asked, but it was something I was intrigued by when she talked about being taken to star systems and describing some of the stars that she was taken to. And I said, have you ever been in another form during any of these experiences? And out of the blue, she said, yes, I was once in one of these other forms for a time. So it's almost like we can choose what we need for a particular task, so we may not always be in our physical form. So the soul is actually able to move around more than perhaps we realise. And I think that's a very important one, because I told you I was going to take you down the rabbit hole a little bit. This is down the rabbit hole. Here, this is what he said. I think I levitated last night. I was in a bubble when I travelled. My ancestors say I go back to my planet when I die. The great ancestor is a manta. And he talked about various levels of manta. My brother manta is someone I see on the spaceship. I see him as human and other times as manta. Isn't that interesting? And he also told me that sometimes, and this is where I think we're going, is I've had a number of cases now where someone's been looking, as he did, at his school friends, some of the school children, sometimes seeing their human form and sometimes seeing an ET form, almost like they're showing another aspect of themselves that isn't human. And he's able to see it. And some people I've discovered are able to actually go into a consciousness where they're seeing more of who you are from that other level. And that sounds pretty interesting, doesn't it? And I wonder whether that's where we're going to. Ancient Egyptians, he told me, were not human, and cat beings or lion beings built the Sphinx. It was to tell humans there are other life forms. And these are the kinds of things that you hear, and it just blows you away, because what is that? How do they know that? And what does it mean? Okay, I'm going to show you a little bit more about what Paul remembers about being taught on the spacecraft and with his school friends and non-humans. And what he described initially is that he's in these kind of cylinders where he can't move. And I said to him he could see blue beings through the cylinders. And I said, so what are you doing in the cylinders? And he said, it's my yearly medical exam. So he actually knew, and about the school. So I'm going to show you a little bit of that, just to give you a taste of how they describe it.
Yes.
Could you say a little bit about that again?
Sometimes when I go up on the craft, my friends are actually, some of my school friends, in pods, or they're around in a circle with other beings, and me, and we're doing complex maths or learning about history.
Okay, so sometimes you're there learning things with, and the school friends that you actually see there, those particular school friends, do you ever talk to them about this or discuss it with them?
I did once, but Mum kind of went crazy. I tried to help him more. She said, no.
Just because I didn't want you to be labelled as someone that might be a little bit different and be treated differently than other children. Not because I didn't believe you, but because I didn't want you to be treated differently. Because some kids don't, and a lot of people don't understand the things that are happening to you. Because you don't really understand yet a lot, do you? We're still finding out a lot.
So
that's why.
Okay, so Mum's actually trying to protect you from possible problems with that. That's fair enough. But I remember you saying to me that also you were not sure that they would remember, even though you remembered. Do you remember you saying that to me? You weren't sure. And when you were on talking about the pods, can you say a little bit more about what they were like?
They were like an oval, like his head. Oval like his head.
Okay.
Like that kind of oval.
Yeah.
And we were inside them, we couldn't move, and there was this weird liquid around us.
And what was the liquid like? What did it feel like? Did it feel like water or something different, or something like jelly or something like that? What did it feel like?
Something not water, not like water, not like jelly.
Okay. Was it sort of in between, or you know, what did you feel like with it?
I couldn't move.
So it kept you still. Okay. And when you were aware of that, what were you feeling? Was it scary or?
I just thought it was a dream.
Oh, so it felt like a dream to you. Okay. And could you see through the pod that you were in? Could you see anything?
A little bit, but I could see through, the rest I couldn't.
Okay. And could you see any shapes or any form outside or anything like that?
Kind of like these.
Like these. And what are these here? Oh, eyes. So like you could see eyes. Could you?
No, these ones were heads.
Oh, these ones, they're heads.
That's the left side of it, and that's the right side of it.
Okay. And so you could see these, what these are like heads?
Yes.
Okay. So you could see heads through the pods that you were in as well?
You only see that much out of it.
Oh, okay. Okay. So on this page, for example, have you got anything you'd like to say about what you've got on this page that you've drawn? What is this here?
A ship.
Okay. And is this a ship that you've seen?
Ship I have seen and a ship that I've been on.
So you've been on this ship?
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember how long ago you were on that ship?
Can't remember. I drew.
What about this here?
One of the things that was interesting was he told me that he started to do the drawings when he was about 3 years old, when he was ready to do those drawings. He talked about a number of beings that were there that helped him. And one of the things he also, was talking about was he got taught in a kind of school with other humans, like his school friends, but also some that didn't look human. I said, how did you know that they weren't human? He said, because their eyes were different. And he was talking about using his mind to create things in the air and to manipulate things in the air. And he said also we got taught very complex subjects. So I said, could you tell me how complex are those subjects? And he said, no, because they're too complex for you. So I was definitely put in my place there. And there you go. Now, isn't that interesting, though, the way I wanted to show you that, really all I do is reiterate what I'm being told, but just so you can hear how they describe things and how they understand things. And this is how many of my interactions have been, is just hearing their story or how they've understood them. Right, let's take you to some more interesting cases that I've come across. This young man, notice again, ADHD, so many of them. His father, who's an engineer in Texas, wrote to me about them all having experiences, but the children were really explaining things about the experiences, actually more than the parents understood. And this is what he said. He said he came from Andromeda, that his mother had blue skin, and the language was thought forms with telepathy. And one of the fascinating things that freaked him out a little bit about his son is he said, he even asked me to explain what it was I was doing at work because he couldn't understand the computer code I was writing at the time. So in other words, while Edward, as I'll call him, the engineer, was on a computer at work, Peter was able to access his father's consciousness and actually see what he was doing on the screen at work and was actually asking what it was. This is what I mean about these kinds of abilities. He feels he can read people's minds and it can be scary. He claims to see through other people's eyes at times. and he sees UFOs and acts as though it's all normal. There's another young man who I have had communication with his family and what have you in the UK. One of the things that he told me was when he went to school, he told the teachers that they teach in a linear fashion and he thinks in spirals. So he was explaining why he didn't resonate with their kind of information. And he told me this. He told me he came through a portal in the sun. And this is really interesting because any of you want to look at some of the strange anomalies around the sun now, it makes you wonder whether or not that's extremely accurate, because there does seem to be strange kinds of objects they're finding in the sun's energy. If you go and look for yourself. Many of the children born these days have memories intact from their previous existence on board craft as extraterrestrials. They are kept on track by continuing their interaction with their cosmic family while they're in human form. And the fascinating thing is that more and more children will tell me that about their space family, where they're from, and that they've come in human form. This young man, some of you may be aware of, I have spoken about him before. Boriska came to my attention probably about 15 years ago now. He spoke on Project Camelot. They went over to Russia to meet this young man. And he talked about, I used to fly from Mars to Earth. He talked about the Lemurians that he remembers visiting, and there were wars on Mars at the time. He also spoke about cosmology. He was extremely aware. And he also, his life on Mars, its inhabitants, the flights to other planets, including Earth, and a country called Lemuria. There is knowledge under the pyramids. As an aside, he was explaining that. Well, look at these kinds of images that we get. There are a great deal of evidence now. There were giants on the planet. And one of the interesting accounts that I had with talking about one of the intelligences, this young boy told me that we were being upgraded by some of these intelligences, and he was aware of it because he was there at the time, and they did genetic modification, and they were making us more like them, was how he explained it. My last life was on Mars. I used to build interstellar craft. Zach is 16. He lives in the US. I've had numerous conversations with him over Skype. One of the fascinating things, he went into depth and information about the fact that he knew how to build interstellar craft. I said to him, was this something you learned on spacecraft? Was this something downloaded? He said, no, this is past life memory. So he already has retained it. And this is what he's been on wars with Mars, with various groups of extraterrestrials. And of course, we know there's a lot of anomalies on Mars. I'm going to talk to you about some 7-year-old girls in a minute that actually have been on spacecraft to Mars and tell me about the inhabitants under the surface of Mars as well. So I told you we'd be going down the rabbit hole. Past life recall at 5 years old, Peter knew as much as there was to know about Andromeda because he said he is from there. This electrical engineer and have seen many craft and had encounters. Both children, the daughter 7 and Peter 12, have conscious recall of their encounters with multidimensional awareness of past life recall. And this is something Peter told Edward, was this: I can do great things. Something amazing happened before I died. We left something on the moon to help Earth. I was sent to help. Now, these are images from the moon, by the way, and you can look them up for yourself if you so desire. There's an interesting pyramid there, other strange structures. Mars Rising is a wonderful documentary that you can look at if you want to. Edward researched anomalies on the moon, which suggested to Peter there was a machine located there which worked with consciousness, both biological and mechanical. He asked Peter if this was accurate, and Peter immediately said, yes, it is. Immediately. And he said, and wrote to me, was this certitude from his past life recall? His father doesn't know. Now, this is the interesting thing, is there's an absolute certainty, a clarity of information from these children that you have to look at and at least examine as something that's very important. So let's look at, is there evidence? Is there other evidence regarding this? This is something I came across recently from Sergeant Carl Wolf, Air Force, had top secret crypto clearance, and worked with the Tactical Air Command, Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. This is the gentleman. You'll see this on disclosure. Remember the little lad saying something big is on the moon? Okay. Look at these interesting images. While working at the NSA facility, I witnessed photographs taken by the lunar orbiter and the moon that showed clearly detailed artificial structures of domes, mushroom-shaped buildings and towers. These photos were taken prior to the Apollo landing in 1969. He said, I remember going home and naively thinking that I can't wait to hear about this on the evening news. And here it is more than 30 years later, and I hope to hear about it tonight, he was saying in 2001 in the National Press Club. That was what he was saying. And he was stated he was willing to testify under oath before Congress regarding this testimony. So we've got children that are saying, you know, before I came here another time, we left things on the moon for you. And I've a number of children that say the moon is artificial, that there are beings under the moon, and that there are things on there that are actually affecting consciousness. Now, these are children all under 10. So you have to ask yourself, where are they getting this information? Now, this is a fascinating story. And about this young boy, I connected to him because I was talking to his father in the US, who was having incredible experiences at the time. And his son came walking into the room. And he said to his father, I'd like to talk to Mary. And, you know, I'm a stranger to him. I was quite surprised that he'd want to speak to me. He didn't know me. So I said to him, I said, can you tell me, you know, why you want to speak to me? And he said, well, it's because of your frequency. So I thought, well, that's a different one. So I said, okay. So I said, what is it you want to tell me? He said, well, I need to tell you that I come from Orion. I was a light physicist. And I worked on advanced technologies such as time travel. I've come to this planet. He said, with this awareness, he said it's really difficult because the scientists here are basically too dumb. They are so behind in their understanding that I can't even begin to explain to them what I understand. He said the nearest is Tesla. And he said that he'd asked his father to get as much information on Tesla, which was pretty basic, but he could use that as a baseline. And that's how he explained it to me. He said, there's a lot of us, he said, but they've got them in underground bases and they're working with them and they're training them. But he said, I don't want to be part of that because it's not for the best of humanity. Because he said it's very hard on this planet because normal schools, he said, they don't understand. And he said, and I can't even begin to explain what I understand. He said, so unless I go into one of these bases where they know about us and they're training us, he said, you know, I'm having to struggle with what is standard schooling here, he said, which is really primitive. Okay, so you've got a 9-year-old explaining this, and what you may like to know about Nikola Tesla is actually he was autistic. Just a little aside, which I think is really fascinating. This young lad, Asperger's ADHD, the music is about shifting our DNA. Now this young man is, I think he's 11, this one. Yes, he's 11 in Australia. The mother contacted me, has had experiences herself. And this is one of the beings that he sees that he feels is a loving being, he tells me. And what he was saying was, he plays the piano, and he says that sometimes when he plays the piano, one of these beings comes and helps him play certain types of songs, he calls them. And he said it's the same energy as this particular being. And this is what he said. His mother said he knew the titles before he even started playing. And he said to me, and I chatted to him about the process. And he said, when I play the 3-minute song, my hands cramp up from doing it normally. But with this, I can change speed and do it for 12 minutes, and I don't feel any pain at all. It's like my hands are doing it by itself. When I have finished, I feel drowsy, like I'm going to pass out. These songs I need to give to people to wake them up. His songs from he channeled these pieces. At no time, his mother said, did Arthur practice them first. He named each one before playing it. It was as though he knew what was coming next, because you could see if he made a mistake, he knew it. Then he would repeat the notes in sequence, all of this in a few seconds. If he hadn't prepared it, how did he know he made a mistake? And these are some of the titles. Insanity, Decoding Human DNA. Learning, Meditation, Going Within Yourself, Arrival. Now, the reason I brought Juliana Okar is I got to know this lady through her writing to me. She's a celebrated violinist. She's Japanese. She lives in America. She's had an incredible amount of different accounts of her own experiences with otherworldly beings, ETs, near-death experiences, a whole range of things. But what her frustration was, her mission was to talk about her experiences. But everyone who ever came to hear her wanted to hear her music or wanted to hear or see her artwork, which again was downloaded. She said she wasn't an artist, but it would come through her. So I actually sent her these pieces because she was a musician. And I wanted to get feedback from her about what she made of this. Again, trying to, if you like, get some kind of corroboration or validation. And this is what she said. I believe Arthur is contacted by the aliens or master musical spirits. It's amazing composition, it's genius. I liked it very much. By the way, Arthur is the name he chose himself from, because all the names obviously have been changed. The first one is combined a few bars of Beethoven's music. She said, my alien experiences happened also in childhood and went far beyond. When I was overtaken by the entity, I felt something similar to what he's saying. I received amazing power, but I was left drained and crashed. As a result, I could not go to school, exactly as that young lad talked about. So this is a little bit of her story, just so you can see the connection. And I find it fascinating, the synchronicities where I meet different people that help me corroborate some of the information. This is one of her experiences with a craft. She's author of One Life, Many Worlds. She's a violinist and artist. And she tried to commit suicide at one time because she was really struggling where nobody believed her, and her family, much as they loved her, also didn't understand and didn't believe her. And during this near-death experience where she overdosed, she had her heart was already, she had a problem with her heart, so with the overdose, her heart stopped. And as this happened, at one point she believed she was already dead. She saw a humanoid figure she felt was different to the aliens. He was in a white robe and she communicated with him. The being changed her perspective on her life as he answered all her questions. The emergency doctor that saved her, as her heart had stopped, he was able to restart it. The doctor didn't know about all the pills that she'd swallowed, so this was not explored by the medical team. She remarked it was extremely strange how the quantity of drugs didn't seem to have any effect on her physical recovery. They didn't know she'd swallowed all the drugs. Her heart actually was different afterwards, and she felt she received soul lessons from her near-death experience, became a completely different person. She exhibited new academic abilities, received the highest score in her studies, began to perceive spirits, becoming more clairvoyant and mediumistic, and experienced interdimensional portals where she visited other worlds and met extraterrestrials. And why she wrote to me more than anything was because she wanted to tell her story to the ufological community and talk about the extraterrestrials and her otherworldly experiences. But the UFO community, guess what? It wasn't tangible enough. It wasn't concrete enough for their research. And it's only recently now I've written about her story in UFO Truth, and she's starting to be invited to UFO groups now. So they will actually open up to the fact that this is what these are some of the experiences she had. As you can see, there is this beautiful lady. The artwork is also brought through her, and it's all frequency. So, this is how, she said, this is my mission, to tell people, this is my experience and what have you. So this is what she's saying. My alien experience happened in childhood. I was overtaken by the entity. I felt something similar to what Arthur was saying. It was an amazing power I received, but I was drained and crashed afterwards, as he is. Definitely, Arthur is contacted by the aliens or master musical spirits. Amazing composition, genius. I like the music a lot. And I felt that was extremely valid because she'd experienced the same thing when she was in post-war Japan. Okay, poor kids. This is what they feel. Poor us, poor kids who come to volunteer. We have such a difficult time ahead of us, a real fight. This 9-year-old from Europe spoke to me via an interpreter because a mother wrote to me saying she'd been told she had a special child. This child started speaking in star languages and told her one of the languages healed water. And this is what she said the 9-year-old told me via the interpreter. I'm here to help my family wake up. Everyone is sleeping. They want us to wake up and see how powerful we really are. Some individuals are from dayland and evening land, and they've come here to help humanity with the awakening. It's very dangerous to come here and help because memories can be deleted at birth, destroyed by society, education, drink, or drugs. They come here aware of the dangers and still want to come and help. We are not awakened yet. We need to increase our energy as we don't have the energy required. It's stolen from us. How can we protect it? I asked her. Don't get angry about small things. Don't speak on mobile phones for long times. No TV, microwaves, or wireless internet. At present, we only have 5.5% energy. We need 1.5%. She told me 50% of the planet are star seeds. But when you go to school, for many of the star seeds, they program them out of their light. And so only maybe 20% of that 50% retain their light. Now remember, this is coming from a 9-year-old. This is what blows me away. And here we go. This is 2 of her friends. Emoka is the blue being, and this is the green type of being, and this is one of her scripts. Again, the scripts come up time. I'm here to help my family wake up. Everyone is sleeping. She knows where these languages are from, and she talks to water to heal it. She says, parents have to listen. Something will happen in the next 5 years to this planet, from 2012 to 2017. Interesting dates, and I've been hearing that more and more. And some of you may know Masaru Emoto, a wonderful gentleman who talked about water and how he was able to show through his research how water can be altered and changed by frequency, by language, by music, by prayer, by intent. He was able to demonstrate this through his research. Messages in Water is one of the many books that I actually met him in Montreal quite some years ago now. I think it was 2006. Of course, he's no longer with us, sadly. So I asked Dr. Ohlson, who also has been taught how to energize water. And she said, I have no problem believing this. The spiral formations I've been working on in my water research are loading energy back in the water and helps healing, recharging, strengthens the energy field, the aura, whatever it's pointed at. Rightly used, it could be a bliss for humanity in rebuilding our earth. Healing works on a cellular level, whether you believe it or not. The healing from my hands affected the protein binding to a GP53, which plays a role in turning genes on and off. So there you have the science. And I know we need that. It's really important that we have the science with this as well. She's also someone who uses all the crystals. And she's got the most amazing collection of crystals. When I stayed with her for a whole week. I had an amazing time with her. And she said, I was taught how to feel the crystals and stones I sometimes use. I teach others how to do this in my workshops. It's very handy to use crystals and their vibrations. When you need to do self-healing, they have quite an impact, is what she discovered. Now, for some of you, if you want to see the tangibility of that, it's really interesting to look at Dr. Harry Ophil's work. I actually met him a number of times when he spoke at the Nexus conferences, for example. And with his technology, which is the poly-contrast interference photography, PIP program, it's a software program that you can load onto your computer. And he teaches you how to use it because it shows other frequencies, if you like. You know, he's taken many pictures of, in graveyards with spirits and entities. He can see when you through it the potential for illness, this kind of thing. And what was interesting about the crystals that I found fascinating is he was actually showing someone doing crystal healing, and as they were standing there, they had this uncut crystal by the side of them, and with his PIP photography, you actually saw this light leaving this crystal and then actually coming back again. And that I found quite fascinating. And it's all with this. If you are interested in Dr. Harry Olf, he's an amazing gentleman. He's a scientist. He's British. And he's got the most wonderful, if you like, energy, and he's quite a comedian. He's great fun. Okay, healing techniques from non-visible friends. This is one of the other things that Dr. Ohlson was taught through her encounters, a quantum healing through her encounters and how it reaches problems at an atomic level. I got taught by my non-visible friends how to enhance and direct my energy, how to partly leave my body to be able to go into my client's body and feel the problem. I do the same thing to connect to their past lives or problems in their present that can cause imbalance leading to the problem. I correct and balance any imbalanced energies. I also reload them with higher frequencies, and thus they're helped on an energy level. This is proven to halt cancers, but if the treatment ceases before the cancer is cured, the cancer grows and extremely fast with death as the only end. If the cancer is cured but the karma is not balanced, the cancer returns, maybe to another part of the body. And she says she can manipulate matter. I can open a tight lid if I focus my energy outside my body to reach the atoms and elevate them so I can then move the lid. Now, she's showing us what the kids are already talking about. And this is why I think it's so fascinating. Drawn to, I describe it as energy balancing to facilitate the body healing on its own by healing, energizing water. And this is really interesting. And this, you want to look at her research, you can certainly look at that. Simply, it's a way to energize water with more life force, which was with the collaboration with the University of Stockholm and the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. And this is what's really important, is that we can actually have a way of explaining it, having the science behind the experience so that we can draw in those with the 3D world and say, actually, this is important and this is the way we understand it. Now, I'm looking at how we're going. We're going all right. Okay, a 5-year-old girl explains her drawings, her trips on spacecraft. The daughter has absolutely no fear. This is one of her drawings of the beings coming into her room. This is a spacecraft that she's in with one of what she calls the hybrid friends and a little boy. Let me explain how her mother wrote this to me. The daughter explained this drawing of this being and being taken through the window. This is what she said. It was a boy, a special friend, who walks through the window. It doesn't matter if the window is open or closed. He comes in when we're in our bunk beds. Her mother asked, why did he come to see her? She said, he's telling me all about your baby. It's a boy baby and will come in your tummy soon. He, the being, comes at night. He was telling me all about outer space. She then went on to say, I woke up in the night and I thought I heard little footsteps. Then I just went back to sleep. I thought it was you, Mum and Dad, but I saw a white foot and I said, don't be afraid, I'm a nice person. I'm sorry I scared you. I said it so it wouldn't be afraid of me. Aww. How's that? And then the mother wrote this to me. I'm texting word for word what she says because she's getting a little bit freaked out. All that's happening is that they are in a spaceship in a craft. The craft is grey and the windows are blue. Okay. Her daughter says, that's one of our special friends. That's a girl. She's half girl and half special friend. Her hair is, the colour of her hair is light brown. She has thin hair. How many of the hybrids have thin hair? That's a boy that's jumping up and down. So she's going into the account really well so that he can look out. He's not tall enough yet. Those are stars and the moon and the sun, and the big ones are planets. Mercury, Mars and Jupiter. She said to me, the special friend has a hybrid body. Her hair on her head is not as thick as hers. Her hybrid home is cold and everyone is leaving and Mars is their new home. 7-year-old girl. Look at the detail there and what that 7-year-old girl is saying. So let's go into another account from another 7-year-old girl who also went to Mars. This here is one of the beings she drew, which is like the mantid being, this being here. And she said this one was very quiet and didn't talk very much, was almost like in her hierarchy. She said the greys talk all the time, chatter all the time, is the way she said to me. A taller green alien standing on Mars in front of the dome. This is her drawings. This is her mother's drawing of 2 little grey beings and a mantid the daughter recognised. This is the dome she drew, the dome on Mars that she saw. And these are some domes on Mars, by the way. You can look at them on the Mars rover, just out of interest. This alien is important to me, the alien community, because he's very different to the grey aliens. The grey aliens don't need clothes because of their species of aliens. The green alien is rare, it doesn't talk at all. The grey ones talk all the time. The domes can be black or white. Very, very interesting. And this, again, is a little bit more that I found fascinating. This is one of the spacecraft she goes on. There's actually Earth down here. Space school, the school on Mars, we don't learn anything we learn on Earth, she said. Now remember, this is another little girl of 7. My daughter Fern described Mars as a desert. The aliens fed her and were very nice, and they spoke telepathically. She learnt paranormal skills. She saw babies in a crib and aliens of various ages. She interacted with a teenage alien in this school and said she learnt the most from her. When she returned, the aliens cloaked their craft so we couldn't see them. So she was aware that they can cloak. And then she explained, I was levitated out of bed to a spaceship with 3 legs, and this has got 3 legs here. There are grey aliens, and some are small and some are tall. On Mars, I learnt to look through walls. I can still do this at times. I don't learn anything we learn here on Earth. I finished magic school. It's mostly science. I learnt about time, space, and gravity. Time controls everything. Time controls all. So I now have 3 children that talk about going to Mars and explaining. Now this was, again, looking for corroboration. These are what some of the strange script this 7-year-old young lady spoke about. Now I got a letter from another family whose daughter had seen this strange symbol everywhere. She says, you saw it everywhere. And she also had experience going to Mars. So I'm calling this lady Amy. My daughter Fern was 7, had experiences with ETs and saw this symbol repeatedly, but she's not sure what it meant. Fern saw it going on her wall one day, and then a couple more times after that in different locations. She said, I've attached the drawing. I would love to know if you've seen this symbol before or any thoughts you may have on it. So I sent this symbol to another family whose daughter had said she'd been on a spacecraft to Mars. I thought, well, I'll see what happens. The father wrote back to me, and he said this. His daughter didn't know exactly what it meant, but saw the ET teacher write it on the board when she was on Mars. She said it meant, we found you and we're tracking you and we will continue to come and get you, but then said, I'm not sure this is all it means, though. In other words, if a person sees this, it's a sign you have made contact, although there is a higher meaning. Keep in mind, I did not tell her where the picture was from or why. I was asking her what it meant. At the very least, it's surprising that she knew instantly that it was about ET contact. So there's no front loading there. This is what this other young girl who'd been to Mars had said. So we've got decoders as well. And this is more of what has blown me away over the last few years and why I felt so inspired to write the book about the children. Some of you will be aware of Tracy Taylor's images. There's a whole chapter of her, about her and a story in Awakening. These were what fascinated me when I first came into this phenomena because of the complexity of them and how unusual they were. And Tracy told me that some of the black and white ones she would do in 10 minutes flat. Had no idea where they came from other than they were brought through her. And these complex ones, and she's got some more amazing drawings. Well, this lady had looked at these drawings in the US and decided to show her 7-year-old and her 4-year-old child. One was a boy, one was a girl. And she didn't say anything at all about, what do you think of these pretty pictures? No front loading whatsoever. Both of them said they're from the aliens, instantly. Okay? And then the 7-year-old went into detail, and he said this. They contain information about aliens. The pictures contain images of harvesters of energy, machines which harvest the sun's energy. There are different types. The other pictures contain information about the aliens. One is about the 7 who will be coming. There are eagle people and cat lion people. They have ancient messages. This is the one called Ancient Future, Evolutionary Creation, and Possibilities. But it's not all he said. I honestly wish he was making this up, Mary, because it confronted her so much. I asked about the pyramids in Tracy's painting, sun. That's how they, aliens, will come. That's where they will land and arrive. It's also a teleportation machine. The big pyramid isn't the only one. There are others. They will come at the pyramids and then fly over the ground to the South Pole and then shoot up to the North Pole by way of a teleporter and then fly down to the pyramids again. He made hand motions which indicated the craft would teleport or pass through the center of the earth from pole to pole. The mother said, "When you say others, do you mean other pyramids?" The son said, "I mean other teleport places on every continent, places all over the world." The mother said, "So there are other types of teleportation places other than the big pyramid of Khufu?" "Yes, in the side of the hill, lots of hills, hundreds of them around the world. It's actually a place where the aliens do science there." I stopped asking questions. I think I just needed to digest this. He was starting to scare me again. Her 7-year-old son has dyslexia and says he sees the information in his mind. So let's look at whether or not this has tangibility. What does he say here? Astrophysicist claims there are interdimensional wormhole portals above the Earth near Alaska and Antarctica. Fascinating, isn't it? This is in a Russian documentary where this astrophysicist, Kip Thorne, and his colleagues substantiated the possibility of nearly instantaneous movement in space-time travel. They put forward the idea of wormholes and black holes, according to which black holes are located at close distances on our planet and take the form of wormholes. Now, isn't that interesting that you've got this kind of information that's slowly coming out? But if you want to know more, it's in this Russian documentary here. Kip Thorne concluded that near to Earth, there's an entrance into a wormhole leading to the star Vega. Just out of interest. Okay, let's see how we're going. Okay. 7-year-old daughter picked out the real from the fake pictures of extraterrestrials. Now, we struggle because we get so much disinformation with what is truth. But it seems like the new upgrades don't seem to have the same kind of problem if we can take this kind of testimony seriously. And this is what he said. She picked out the real from the fake pictures of extraterrestrials out of many they looked at in Google. And she chose just 2 to 5% to be real out of hundreds. While we were looking through the pictures, she pointed out the ones she felt were real. The photographs, she said, were also photographs I felt had the highest potential of being real. I recognised most of the ones she picked, and there was usually a believable story behind them. One was the alien autopsy photo. She said that these were different race of grey. Overall, the 2.5 to 5% turned out to be real. In my opinion, that's probably an accurate number of photos that even look real to me, and I spent countless hours researching this. She was just going on how she felt. So it was a feeling and a sensing and a knowing. These are some of the statements that I've just pulled out of the book that I'm writing now, just to give you a bit of a taster of what the children are saying. The mantid are my family, 8 years old. I saw many other children on the spaceship. Some were not human. 7-year-old. I am an ambassador from Arcturus. I come as an ecological engineer, a 17-year-old from New Zealand who is aware that he needs to create new kind of habitation for humans. People built the Sphinx to tell people in the future they, the extraterrestrials, were real. The ordinary people were humans. The rulers were not human, but like cat beings. School programs are like a virus. We are infected with this virus and it extinguishes our light. There are special schools for children like us on the ocean floor, underground bases and off-planet. And these children are trained by other agencies on this planet. There are lots of moons that are artificial, like around Saturn and Jupiter. Some people are affected by them. So they're aware what's going on. Okay, so we're getting to the final of giving you a sense of the big picture. Activation of our DNA, high-frequency people and low-frequency people. What does Dr. Ohlson mean by that? And this is how she sees us as a species shifting, either going in one way or another. And she's saying this. I think the increased resonance frequency from both space and the Earth is pushing the DNA into some sort of three-dimensional configuration so that dormant genes in the so-called junk DNA are aligning. It's like a time-activated evolutionary step controlled through DNA. Remember what Dr. Crick was actually saying, a similar thing. DNA being the crystalline formation with an encoded message aimed to speed up evolution. However, the biocontainer is one of three parts influenced by the other two parts, mind and soul. The soul is an energy container which moves from body to body between lives, dimensions and worlds with frequencies which have a huge impact on DNA. The soul provides the life force, the data bank, and this main control sends frequencies, signals, programmed photons, electrons, gamma rays to help you carry on your mission and evolve. Not everyone will choose to upgrade, so there will be high frequency people and low frequency people, and your lifestyle will either enhance the frequency or lower it. That's how she sees we are going. Okay. The new human, awakening to who we are, evolving human consciousness, we have come to help. There is a race of beings upon the planet increasing in number, though visually and physically indistinguishable. To most humans, they are the bringers of light and they're here to guide the awakening of terrestrial consciousness. The new children are born without programs and will bring about a global awakening. And this is the kinds of things they're telling me when I talk to them or when I talk to their parents or through this information. The children and young people who are being born, many have conscious recall of where they're from, a deep and profound understanding of who they are and their previous star origins. They do not need governments to tell them we're not alone in the universe. They already know we are not. They know that the planet is in dire shape, both ecologically and spiritually. They know we're being lied to and manipulated. They know that we're educated and programmed into a limiting and limited reality. They know about covert technologies which control the public and its fear-based mindset. They're aware of their abilities. They know about the many species visiting our planet. The new human is here to wake humanity up. And to just conclude with that, one of the most beautiful gentlemen I've connected with recently, because I'm writing what I call the God chapter, and he is a reverend, a minister in the Baptist tradition, has written 2 books of his understanding and interpretation of the Bible from the experience he's had with encounters with beings and also being healed himself. And this is Alien Scriptures and a New World if you can take it. I have been forever changed by this contact. I'm also writing about another gentleman who's been a minister for 40 years and is finally coming out and saying he's had ET experiences and past lives. So we are the ones we're waiting for, says the Reverend Michael Carter. We've come to appreciate the universe is filled with intelligences and is in itself intelligent, to feel an increasing sense of oneness with all the beings and all creation. One of the messages I received from the visitors is the most difficult characteristic that they have encountered when dealing with human beings is our fear of differences and our love of violence. This divisive fear must cease if we're to go on to the next phase of our evolution. A change in consciousness is what is required to make this next evolutionary step. It's not what we believe that will make us better persons. Our behaviour does. Look within. And these are 2 of the final few that I want you to see. This is Nikola Tesla, as we've mentioned. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of existence. To understand the true nature of the universe, one must think of energy, frequency, and vibration. Think of all the different things that I've been speaking about today, frequency and vibration. We need to get over it and accept the inarguable conclusion. As you focus closer and closer on the structure of the atom, you would see nothing. You would observe a physical void. The atom has no physical structure. We have no physical structure. Physical things really don't have any physical structure. Atoms are made out of invisible energy, not tangible matter. The universe is immaterial, mental, and spiritual. So this takes it into consciousness itself. And as this 12-year-old is saying here, and this was fascinating to me, he told his father, humanity's been at this point 3 times, but we've been knocked off course. This time, there is a 95% chance we will make it, and possibly a 100% chance we are headed to a higher level. It's due to the shift that's affecting everyone. He said, it's the star seeds and the indigos of the planet like us. Gaia cherishes us because we can help the vibration of the planet more than any others. And beyond that, this I had to put in. I had to put this in. This is a grandma in Queensland who her granddaughter actually said to her, and I asked if I had permission to say it, and this granddaughter said to her, "You don't have to worry, Nana. They're guiding us home." And I thought that was pretty beautiful. So really, that's all I can share with you today. But I will say that I'm speaking at the Paradigm Shift Summit. And if you want information about Free and the new organisation, where we are going to rattle cages, I can promise you, with this new organisation. But I do hope that what I've spoken about today makes some sense, or at least for some of you. If there's anything in it that makes sense to you, then go and look some more. But that's my research. This is what I'm finding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Can we do a few questions,
Yeah,
Mary?
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll just close that down. Yep.
Sorry, I'd like to know if we can hear Arthur's music anywhere.
What I need to do is make sure and check with the family so that I can actually play that. I haven't actually checked. I have got the music, but I have to make absolutely certain they're okay with it. And they do want to be anonymous, so I have said, look, people may very well want to hear this. So maybe we can do it where, you know, they can do it anonymously and people can actually get the music. And it really is quite interesting because those that have heard it have definitely felt something very different after they've listened to it. But I have to make sure first that the family is okay with it before I let you hear it. But it's certainly intriguing, isn't it? You know? And this is just one thing. I've got another young man who is an artist, and he tells me that all his artwork is about triggering interdimensional awareness, because all of his stuff is star systems, and his artwork, actually, when you look at it, will trigger you into another state. And he's very aware of that because he said, that's what they want me to do. And he comes from, he said, another dimension. He's aware that that's where he's from. These are the accounts that I'm having. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what the ufological community are going to say about some of this kind of information, because it really is taking it, as far as I'm concerned, to a whole new level, if you want to believe the children. Yes?
Hello, Mary. Thank you for the lecture. It's very informative. I'm just wondering if you have any further insight into the orbs occurring around particular people on mass, particularly when we go to bed.
Yeah, I do feel, thank you. I'm going to tell you a little story, and it's with a lady who does a lot with crop circles. And one of the insights I got about what the orbs were, and I'm not saying all of them are this, was I did a regression with her in Glastonbury because she wanted to know that when she was woken up, her boyfriend was absolutely freaked out, and he explained that during the night he kept seeing these orbs flying around, and it freaked him out. He tried to wake her and she couldn't be woken up. And as she woke up, she said, it's not what you see, it's what you don't see. And she'd never understood why she said that, and she couldn't understand what that meant. So in this regression, when we did this regression, we found out the orb that freaked him out was her, out of body. It was actually her. And that's why he couldn't wake her up, because she wasn't in her body.
If there's multiple orbs, and if they recognise the camera,
Yeah.
can recognise them,
That's it.
hit the camera and orbit image.
What you'll see in some of the orbs actually is faces and what have you. I've got one with an ET in the middle, but what I did as an experiment, and anyone can do it, you don't need expensive. In fact, if your camera's not very expensive, it's even better because there's less screens. I've got a picture of it in another Triggers of Consciousness. I think I show this outside, and I often take pictures of orbs and all sorts. And I feel you can call them up because they are conscious, and they may be some of your spirit family, your ET family, or whatever. And I said, come on, guys, you know, show yourselves, at least one of you. And I had a friend with a camera just a few feet away from me, and I didn't see it, but I felt it. And I said, well, I think it's there now, take a picture. A meter from my hand was an orb. And it really isn't hard to pull them in. And you see them around, when I was at James Gilliland's ranch, for example, literally within seconds of taking one picture with orbs, the whole picture was filled with orbs, and some of them, he says, are nature spirits as well. So it seems in non-physical form, that may be very well one of the ways that we travel. And I firmly believe that's the case.
You need to talk a bit further, maybe.
Okay. Yes.
Mary, I was just interested, the young man you mentioned who's doing the artwork and who knows it's here for a purpose, is he ready to make that available?
Not yet. But I will tell you a little bit of the story because it's a fascinating story. He also had, when he was a child, he was very drawn to army, to not knowing why he was drawn to the army, and a gunner of all things when he was a young child, always wanting to dress in the army and stuff. And it wasn't till later on he actually got some insight into that, because one of the things was being drawn to this army thing and not knowing and feeling like the spirit, he could see spirits of soldiers going through terrible trauma, still not knowing why. But also in his artwork, because he was drawn to that, and he was explaining that when he was learning about art, one of the more conventional types of art that he had to do, he couldn't do it very well. And he did, he was very tuned in, very intuitive. And he said, Mary, Leonardo da Vinci came and helped me and told me how I could draw things, and he was guiding him. And I said, how did you know? And he said, I just knew. But the fascinating story with this was that when he explored the feeling of wanting to dress in the army and had seen these soldiers when he was a kid and got really scared at night, he would see these soldiers in different ways, was he realized that he was one of the soldiers that he was seeing in a past life in World War I. And I said, so why did you connect with it? He said, I didn't achieve my mission because of the war, so I've come in again to achieve my mission, and now I'm going to bring through my artwork to wake people up. So he hadn't finished his mission because of the war. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Oops, yeah.
Yes, Mary, I guess your work as a therapist, did that really sort of awaken you to much more experiences? And I guess will you be talking about that tomorrow? Or?
Oh, certainly. I hope to go into detail. One of the things that's been really interesting for me is the process of putting all these accounts together, making sense of them, because, when you work in this field, it is inevitable that you're going on your own journey. You can't possibly help people and work with them over the number of years, over 20 odd years now I've worked with experiencers, and not be touched and changed. Because you want answers too, because things come up that you've never been exposed to before, that I never knew about. So I talk about that in the book, that, I'm forever changed, as I know Mariana would say the same, from those accounts. Some of you go through the experience, some of us get changed by listening and hearing that experience, and I feel that's what's happened for me. It's got me to question everything in my life, everything that I thought was real. And I know that experiencers go through all of that because they've got to start again, because so much of what we're educated into believing is inaccurate and untrue. There's truths within there, there's a lot of disinformation, and that goes in every area, from science and biology, anthropology, archaeology. Look at how little we know about our DNA and how we're lied to about that. We're not told all those things that whistleblower was talking about. And this is the thing that frustrates me, because I think you're all here because you want to understand. You want the truth. Whatever that truth may be, you want to know what it is. And it's very hard to find the truth on this planet, because there are so many agencies out there that don't want to tell you what they know or whatever. And that's why I'm so hopeful with the children, because they don't watch talk shows, they don't read books. They are coming with a clarity and an openness to the information they have a knowing of, and they're actually teaching us more of what is real and what the truth is. So forever changed, absolutely. Thank you.
Mary, I just want to go back to Nikola Tesla and the little boy that that was on your presentation, one of them,
yes,
who was very brilliant and which ADD or HD. Did you ever have contact with Patrick Flanagan?
No.
Dr. Patrick Flanagan is recognised as the reincarnation of Tesla.
Oh, right.
And he was the one behind pyramid power in the 80s, 70s and 80s.
Okay.
He's a genius in his own right.
Okay.
And he remembers absolutely everything of his lifetime as Nikola Tesla.
Okay.
And as a genius, I mean, for him, he's scared to come out. The government knows of him very well around the world, but he's kept his genius low. But for kids like that to interact with someone like him who already knows and is in connection with, I'm just asking if you knew of him and his connections and what he's already doing on the planet.
I don't, but I also feel the children eventually, thank you, I do feel eventually the children will connect who they need to connect with. One of the interesting things this young boy told me, that whenever he went to a sacred site, or like the pyramids or Chichen Itza, for example, he says he gets downloads. So every time he goes to one of these places, a whole load of new information. And one of the places he needs to go to is the Pyramid of Khufu for the same reason. He said he will get downloads. He said what people don't understand about the pyramids is that they actually needed to be surrounded by water, but it had to be pure water. And he said with the pure water and the pyramid and the consciousness of the individual, you can teleport. He said that's how you do it. That's how he explained it. He said, yes, but it needs to be surrounded by pure water and in combination with the consciousness of the individual, and that's how he explained it. So again, it's amazing information, and all we need to do now, I think, is start to provide an opportunity and a place for these children to teach us what we need to know. And I've talked about in the book, I'm actually talking about needing new schools. These schools are where these children teach us what we need to know to help them to be all that they need to be. And that is, I think, the next step. And how that's going to manifest yet, I don't know, but I don't think they've been born without that opportunity. There must be something that helps that process. Otherwise, I don't think they would bother to incarnate right now. So I'm very hopeful, but I don't know how it's going to happen yet. But thank you for that. That's really interesting.
Anyone else?
I think we're done. Oh, one more. That's all good. Okay.
I was really happy with what this lady just shared. I think it's really important because there's many people around the world that are connecting at the level that you just spoke about, Patrick Flanagan. I'm one of them, actually. So I'm really looking forward to the workshop tomorrow. And I think it's more conscious people, us getting together, and putting it into flight.
Yes.
And that's why I'm here today.
Okay.
And I'm really happy to connect, and I was really happy to hear that about Patrick Flanagan because of my connection with the Philadelphia experiment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. I just wanted to know when your new book will be out.
Right. Well, I'm writing the conclusion now, but it's a lot of editing that needs to happen. I'm hoping in the next 2 or 3 months it will be ready with a little bit of help and a bit of peace and quiet. I might be able to do that, but it's really virtually ready, other than the fact that it really needs now to be polished a little bit as well. So it's not long, I hope, and I'm really looking forward in a way to putting it out there, but I'm also wondering how it's going to be received, because it really is another step into the matrix. So it's going to be interesting. Thank you.
There was someone here.
Oh, yes. Yes, take it. Yes.
What have you done?
Oh.
Big voice. Okay. Everybody just settle down. That's good.
Okay.
I just wanted to know, just to let everybody know, just
Yeah.
a slightly sceptical notion.
Yeah.
Although I've got no problem with aliens, I've got no problem with special children, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But let's say a child comes to you and they start talking, they immediately say, "Oh, has this experience?" How do you discern if they then think, "Oh, I'm getting some attention now," and the imagination comes into play? I mean, is there a way of discerning? Because that would obviously be a danger.
And look, it's a very important one. I'm a mother and a grandmother, so you know I've got 4 grandchildren, for example. There's 2 things that go on. Obviously, a child doesn't come to me on their own anyway. They're coming with a parent who is, you know, discovered that there's things going on for their child. Now, most mothers here or grandmothers here, you're pretty clear when someone is, you know, your child is fantasizing or telling you a story, or when they're actually talking about an experience. That's the first thing. There is there's just a knowing with your child. You know your child really, really well. The other thing that's really interesting when I've asked, you know, talk to somebody, whether it's over Skype or they've come to see me, is the detail they go into. Now, when you're going into your imagination, often as not that there's a very loose story around that, especially with a young child. But when you have children saying, and they cloaked the craft, I don't know 7-year-olds that know about craft being cloaked and they floated through the wall or whatever. These are not things they see on TV, and the language is not the language that they use. And it's really the detail, it's their understanding of it and how they describe it. There are all those things put together which give it a very compelling effect on its truth. Okay?
I've got to say, I've got a grandchild who's a letter child, so I'll be looking at him a bit differently now.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Thank you, Mary. Are you aware of the information from Russian scientists about the power of light to shift DNA? Like literally some fairly gruesome experiments where pancreases of mice have been destroyed and then a laser encoded with the pancreas of a healthy mouse.
Yeah, okay.
Restores them to life within a few hours. The whole pancreas regenerates. And there's a whole lot of research about how light actually can totally shift energy in a very short space of time.
I'm not aware of it, but of course Edgar Casey talked about this, light and sound as the new kinds of healing. So I'm not actually aware of that. I'd be very interested to know the links, because part of this is pulling in the information from as many different sources to actually see if we can understand what it is that's going on. And that's what I've tried to do most often. I'm always grateful for information that helps me, you know, connect the dots a bit more. So that's really fascinating. Thank you. Are we done and dusted?
We're done and dusted.
There we go.
With that, please give a warm
Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, UFO. Thank you, everyone, for coming and being such an amazing audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming, everyone. What a wonderful audience.